Finding it a hassle to ship your parcel overseas? Wouldn't it be great if you didn't need to travel to the drop-off point or could avoid filling out lengthy consignment notes? With DHL On The Go, you can now send parcels or documents easily. Tell us your shipping details and let our chatbot guide you the rest of the way. Make payment through a secure payment gateway. Arrange a pickup at your preferred location. All of this is done via WhatsApp from your home, office, or anywhere, at any time. Scan the QR code or WhatsApp us now. Ready, chat, go! With DHL On The Go.
Right now, digital connection is human connection. And it's those digital connections Palo Alto Networks has spent 15 years securing. In the last few weeks, we've secured companies, governments, and schools as homes became offices and computers became classrooms. As the world's largest cybersecurity company, we're already protecting millions of remote workers and millions of human connections. Palo Alto Networks, next-gen cybersecurity delivered today.
Finding it a hassle to ship your parcel overseas? Wouldn't it be great if you didn't need to travel to the drop-off point or could avoid filling out lengthy consignment notes? With DHL On The Go, you can now send parcels or documents easily. Tell us your shipping details and let our chatbot guide you the rest of the way. Make payment through a secure payment gateway. Arrange a pickup at your preferred location. All of this is done via WhatsApp from your home, office, or anywhere, at any time. Scan the QR code or WhatsApp us now. Ready, chat, go! With DHL On The Go.
Right now, digital connection is human connection. And it's those digital connections Palo Alto Networks has spent 15 years securing. In the last few weeks, we've secured companies, governments, and schools as homes became offices and computers became classrooms. As the world's largest cybersecurity company, we're already protecting millions of remote workers and millions of human connections. Palo Alto Networks, next-gen cybersecurity delivered today.
Hi, everyone. A very good morning to all of you, and thank you for tuning in. Whether you are currently watching this on WebEx, Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks for making this one of your final items to check off your list for the year. And what a year it's been. As we wrap up 2020 to enter the year of the next normal, we hope you and your family and friends continue to stay well, adaptive, and innovative. My name is Myra from Star Media Group's award-winning Rage Investigative Journalism team, and I'm your host for this 4-day live virtual conference. Ladies and gentlemen, this virtual conference would not happen without our esteemed sponsoring partners. On behalf of Star Media Group, I would like to give a special shout out to all our sponsors. The exclusive exabyte partner, Fusion X, Gigabyte partners, Offo Tech, Palo Alto Networks and Triton Digital, Megabyte partners Experian, Rimini Street, and Tata Consultancy Services, virtual roundtable partners IBM and ServiceNow, and last but not least, our mobile messaging partner SendQuick. And this 4-day live virtual conference is produced by eLearning Minds and live on Cisco WebEx. As all of us strive to rebuild and recreate, to thrive beyond the new normal, businesses are rapidly transitioning and digitizing its business processes and models to be better equipped in facing the next normal. Through the Digital X Data 2020 live virtual conference, we will take you on a 4-day virtual journey to unlock answers in solving businesses and challenges, uncovering growth opportunities in today's data-driven digital world. As you can see on the screen now, the Digital X Data 2020 conference program consists of 8 different sessions spread across 4 days, with 2 sessions daily, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. In total, we have 55 industry-leading subject matter experts, practitioners, and key innovation drivers from across the region who will be driving this 4-day program. To open the Digital X Data 2020 will be 4 daily power panels. Aside from that, we will be showcasing market outlook, trends, forecast of technology, and digital aspects in various business areas across 8 thematic tracks. We are absolutely honored to be joined by 7 global thought-leading knowledge partners who will be powering our thematic tracks. First is the Smart City thematic track by PWC, Green by Frost & Sullivan, Financial by Boston Consulting Group, Retail by Ipsos, Manufacturing by McKinsey & Company, People by EY, Reach by Kanta, and Drone track will be complemented by OFO Tech. To learn more about the conference program and speaker's profile, please scan the QR code on the top right of your screen or go to bit.ly/DXDagenda. Guys, I'm excited to share with you that we are also running a special daily prize draw at this program. We have a total of 24 prizes to be given away, and you can stand a chance to win any of these 3 exciting prizes at each of the 8 sessions. We've got our Philips Bluetooth wireless headphones, our Skull Candy wireless headphones, and our Honor Band 5 Sports Edition. All you need to do is to stay with us till the end of each session, and you will stand a chance to win these exciting prizes. All right. I'm sure you're as excited to kick off the conference as much as I am. Just a few quick housekeeping matters before we begin. First of all, please be patient if you experience any technical or internet glitches. This is a live online event and everyone dials in from different internet bandwidths and devices. For WebEx participants, your microphone and webcam are turned off by default. Feel free to chat with our events crew directly if you need any assistance. You can also email us at events@thestar.com.my if you need any assistance. Lastly, and most importantly, please engage, learn, and enjoy. We're about to start our first panel. With the crisis faced on the global scale, it is more than just the race in deploying the latest technology. There is no better way to kick off the Digital X Data 2020 but by talking about the common future vision for all. Designing Society 5.0, a sustainable, inclusive, human-centered society powered by digital technologies where everyone has access to an enjoyable and vigorous life. And we are very humbled and very honored to have a very powerful panel that will grace the opening of our conference in sharing and discussing not just on Society 5.0, but also the new Malaysia 5.0 digital economy. The first guest speaker of today's opening power panel is the Honorable Yang Berbahagia Datuk Wira Datuk Haji Rais Hussein Muhammad Arif, Chairman of Malaysia's Digital Economy Corporation, also known as MDEC. Our second guest panelist is Jeevan Raju, the country head of Tata Consultancy Services, which is a part of the Tata Group, India's largest multinational business group. The panel would not be complete without our very, very special guest, His Excellency Oka Hiroshi, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Japan to Malaysia. And moderating the panel is Philip Golingai, who is news editor of Star Media Group, who has won 4 Malaysia Press Institute Journalism Awards. This is an absolutely rare opportunity to have such a powerful panel lined up on such a timely and important topic. All right, the panel is getting ready to go, so please stay tuned. We'll be back in just a short while.
Welcome to our exciting, awesome, powered discussion on designing Society 5.0. Our first, I've been reading up on Society 5.0 and it looks like a great future. I feel like I'll be living in a science fiction movie. And our first speaker today will be Dr. Rice.
Thank you, Philip, for having me, fellow respected and, as they all say, powerful speakers. Let me talk about a little bit about Society 5.0 and eventually a little bit on Malaysia 5.0. Malaysia 5.0 is still an evolving subject, and we are fine-tuning it to make sure that it captures everything that we need to capture. Society 5.0 has its origin from Japan. Back in 2016, Prime Minister Abe saw the issues that is being faced by Japan. The three main areas. One is obviously how to stimulate physical stimulus. That's a very important thing because the growth has been quite stagnating despite the quantitative easing. In the layman's term today, is printing money efforts by Japan. So they were looking at how to come up with a holistic development process and progress, right? So strangely, the whole thing was thought out by the Japanese government and through some of their own committees and so on. And then they started pushing that to the public. We are now developing Society 5.0, where it's human-centered, it's not technology-centered. You need all the layers of technology will be supporting the well-being of the holistic well-being of the society. So that was the initial start. The industry, all the big guys, Sony, Toyota, and all the big Japanese industries picked it up from there, and they started developing their own track of what is Society 5.0 should be. And together later, they form a joint committee between the government and the industry. And presto, came about the Society 5.0, and the rest is history. Today, Society 5.0, the Japanese organically developed philosophy, is now been replicated across the globe. Germany have adopted that. Many other developing countries and even developed West have actually adopted that. America is still busy with Trump. So now coming back to what we call Malaysia, we were looking at what is going to be our next. We've had Vision 2020, we have Vision 2030. There's just too many vision. We start do not understanding which vision we should look at. So that's when the Japanese Society 5.0 came about, and we started looking at it, and we see again Malaysia is well positioned. We are designed by God to succeed, right? Only politicians screw it up, right? So for me, Malaysia is designed to succeed. That's why we attracted all the big powers. The Britishers came here. At one time the communists attempted to come here. Sorry, sir. Even the Japanese came here. So everyone came here because Malaysia is in the criss-cross of all the trade. 18% of global maritime trade goes through the Straits of Malacca. We are very strategic position. Having said that, now we need to see what is the best for the many, for the people, not for the few, not for a handful of few. We need to see what is the best for the many. So these are the areas that we are continuously exploring. We have seen so many technology layers, AI, VR, you name it, it's there, right? But how can we use all this in the best interest of the nation and the people? That is the challenge. So this work, as in Japan, they say Kaizen, continuous improvement. So we are working on this now. MDEC will take a very big step in trying to lead this Malaysia 5.0, the details of which will be announced quite soon. Importantly, on the political space or the government space, we saw the National Digital Council and the 4IR Council is established. It has inter-ministry roles, inter-agency roles, intra-agency roles. This is a good start. But we need to also bring the industry players. Why? Because the industry players knows about what they are talking about normally. Sometimes the administration, they think that they know what they're talking about. But what we need to actually have is the industrial players. People like Tata Group, people like, there are so many players who are so well versed in all this technological space and layers. And then let's do what the Japanese did successfully.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Rice. Next will be Jivan. Maybe you can briefly tell us what's the future like with Society 5.0.
From the Tata Group perspective, we've been in existence for 150 years. So 150 years of sustainability has been ingrained in the organization. And one of the secret sauce that was always in the group is two very strong things. One is giving back to the society that we serve. The society that we serve is paramount in what we do, number one. In all companies in Tata Group across the world, under the Tata Group, we have 600,000 people, and we have a market cap of about 150 billion US. And the ethos of it is all about giving back to the community. It is not, we only exist because of the community. So that philosophy is very, very paramount, and that ethos is very paramount in all the groups that we operate in. So what it means by that, from an enterprise perspective, we believe if any organization were to put profit, people, and planet, that would be the secret sauce for Society 5.0. Now, we've started the revolution, the industrial revolution, the digital revolution right now. So the future revolution, which we predict will be a sustainable revolution, whereby it's not only purely about profits, but it's also about people and the planet. And that's going to be, I think, with this COVID pandemic, we've come to realize that, hey, whatever money you have, you can't even spend it. You can't even go outstation, or you can't even go overseas. It only means that we need to take pause in what we're doing as an organization, as a country, as a nation, as well as a society. What can we do for people who are less fortunate, number one, and how we can serve them better? There's a lot of people with a lot of less fortunate things around here. And the new way of living in the Society 5.0 would have to be a very inclusive society, not purely driven by profit. It's very inclusive, whereby we feel the pain of others around in our community. We feel the pain of other society who is less fortunate in our society. And then where we use technology to elevate their suffering, their poverty, and find ways where we can serve them better. Like I said, the philosophy in Tata Group is all about serving the community, and we believe in this philosophy of profit, people, and the planet.
Okay, thanks, Jivan. Sounds like a great future that we have. Okay, next will be the Japan government is at the forefront of the Society 5.0. Maybe Your Excellency can explain what is Society 5.0. And I watched a video by the Japanese government, and I feel that it's awesome. I want to live in that world. So maybe you can explain what's the future like, and is it now?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me here. This very much the interesting sessions, particularly in the light of the experience we are having under the COVID-19. We are kind of getting used to the novel technologies of the teleconference, etc. This is a kind of the showing us a way to the Society 5.0. As my previous speakers, they explained that it was in 2016 that the government of Japan put forth a visions for the future of the human societies, where we expected the physical, the space, and the cyberspace will be merged and fused, so that the each and every member of the society can depend and benefit from the progress of the digital technologies, and no person in the society will left behind, enjoying the benefits for the the solutions of the various social problems. Interestingly, in 2016, the World Economic Forums, if I remember correctly, again they put in place a theme of the Industry 4.0. So there are the commonality in industry, the concept of Industry 4.0 and Society 5.0, in the sense that they are focusing on the enormous progress or potential that the progress of the digital technology have on our societies, But the industry 4.0 will focus on the more kind of the manufacturing side, how they can lead to the enhancing productivity on the making things side. But the society 5.0 has the put an emphasis on how the society and the people can benefit from this the technology developments. So this is the kind of the difference. And we are now the stage 4.0 in terms of societies where we can enjoy the substantial benefit from the technology development, but still the data which are accumulated from the innovative technologies are not widely shared. So we are not fully enjoying the benefit from the technological developments. So the society 5.0 again will focus on how each and every society of the people and society can benefit from the technological developments. For instance, the original intention of the Japan's in putting forth this idea is we are the expecting a grave challenge of the declining populations. But how we divide the gravity of the declining populations yet to achieve the economic progress. Again, we can mobilize technological development. For instance, one of the challenges for the declining population is how the people living in the remote and rural area can have an access to medical care. How the necessary daily commodity can be delivered if we cannot find bus drivers. So in order to fill the gap, for instance, telemedicine is able to supply the very much detailed medical analysis for the people living in the remote areas. So living in the remote areas or the absence of doctors in that particular areas will not be regarded as a kind of handicap. And also providing kind of the autonomous driving bus, again, will be, the living in the remote area, don't feel be left behind. So in this way of making use of the various types of the novice technologies, we can enjoy the benefit. But of course, in order for the visions to be achieved, again, government is kind of put in place a vision, but it is up to the business, it up to the people to actually strive to achieve the visions, make it, the reality. For instance, for business to operate, for instance, a drone delivery thing is something which we have not envisioned in the past. So there is no regulations put in place which enables the drones to deliver things. For instance, autonomous bus driving. Again, nobody was thinking that the cars and the buses are driving without the drivers. So we have to put in place a certain kind of the regulatory frameworks, not putting in place additional frameworks, but make sure this kind of novel service based on the technology will be put to the use of the people. So now we are very much encouraging the business to come forward. So there's a good synergy being forged between the business and the government. And also we are not simply because looking at the self-narrow interest of the Japan, which is kind of facing the populations, the challenges, but this is the intention to serve the global communities because all the services, the benefits that people can enjoy from the technology need to be shared. So, for instance, even less developed countries can enjoy the benefit by simply making use. The people can have an access to internet or the novel services. So we are putting in place an effort so that the people in the world can have an easier access to the services provided by the digital technologies. We are working on it.
Okay. Follow-up question for you. At the moment, Japan is living in where now? Society 4.2, 4.3, 4.4. When are you going to be reaching society 5.0? Is it tomorrow or 10 years?
That's
or
a very challenge. It's a kind of the gradual change, but although they suddenly kind of the disruptive the technological breakthrough will leap us forward as we are witnessing, experiencing here under the COVID-19. But we are putting in place certain demonstration projects where the community can operate the bus services without drivers. And again, we are putting in place certain demonstrations projects where the people can benefit from the telemedicine. So we are gradually moving forward, but the hand in hand goes the government, the kind of the putting place the visions, and also the business, new type of business needs to come forward to the deliver services. And also there has to be a people who can understand and who are not being controlled by this novice, the technology, but it is up to the people who can, decide to use, decide to the benefit from these services. So the government and business and the individual peoples needs to be combined to move forward.
Okay, thanks. My next question is, what's the requirement for a country to achieve Society 5.0? I start with Dr. Rice, then Jeevan, then Your Excellency.
Society 5.0 is the destination.
Okay.
Journey has started. If the journey has not started, God, you are in a terrible situation. Journey has started. In the Malaysian context, our infrastructure is fairly good, regionally speaking. The wherewithals are there. The government policies are there. The willingness to accentuate this wherewithal towards the Society 5.0 is there. The very fact that the PM himself is chairing the National Digital and 4i Council is testimony to that importance that he places on this. And rightly so. Pandemic COVID-19 has shown that the fast adoption of 4IR into businesses. I mean, in the last few months, every one of us would have purchased something online, right? Something online. But that's a very basic need. Yesterday, we were told that the adoption of digitization and digitalization among the SME is only about 50%. That's a very poor figure, And I've experienced many times when I speak to people, when I interact with people, and I ask them, so what do you do? This is what the business. What's your revenue? 280 million ringgit annually. Okay, good. So how do you sell? I used to have retail outlets. Now I had to close down because basically COVID-19, CMCO, MCO, whatever, all the alphabets that comes with it. So we had to close down. So we are going online completely. Good, online. Wow, then you have a digitalized. So tell me, what is your strategy? We are on this particular platform, Lazada. So some of them, for them, the digitalization means putting that on the platform, period. And I asked them, why do not you have, when you're on Lazada, for instance, you have to pay commissions to Lazada, you have to pay the PayPal and this, that, blah, blah, blah. So you will eat into your, just like the delivery guys, they take 30% of your food that you ordered. And the restaurants are crying, aloud. So don't you have your own? Oh, no, it'll be very expensive to hire people. Well, I'm not very sure about this. So there is still the adoption of digitalization is still not very good. And when you talk about digital inclusiveness and nice words, right? But how much we are doing in the context of Malaysia, for instance, there are many, many farmers, fishermen have their products, right? They work very hard and they look very thin, unlike me, right? They look very thin because they work very hard, right? They move and get things done under the sun, goes into the ocean, bring the fishes back, only for the middlemen to take advantage of everything. They continue to live in vicious cycle of poverty. How do we help them? So that's why I always talk about MDEC being a digital economy for the many, not for the few. It is not Kuala Lumpur or Damansara. It has to address all strata of the society. That's really talking about digital inclusiveness. We have issues of income inequality. We all realize income inequality is fast becoming a problem, not only in Malaysia, everywhere. I mean, even in India, it's a big issue, right? The Gini coefficient is not improving. So what do we need to do? That's why 4IR, the use of technology, as what our Excellency Ambassador said just now, use of technology to benefit the many. It has to be the many. It cannot be the few. And if you do not do that, the income inequality will go on becoming wider. So I think it is important for all of us. That's why I always tell my colleagues in MDAC, guys, if only you know your responsibility in driving this digital economy. And guess what? If you fail, what happens? You will become a digital colony of others. You can fight physical colony. When the Portuguese came to Malacca, we were still trying to fight. You can fight the economy colonialism. How? Protectionism, tariff, this and that. Digital colony? There's completely no protection. You know? Even if I ask now to the Malaysians, where do you buy? If you want to think something to buy, where do you go first? You go to Alibaba, you go to Lazada, you go to Shopee and all those kind of things. Even my 7-year-old son orders things on Lazada. Thank God he cannot do the credit card verification. Huh? The rest he does. And then when I go in, I see, hey, what is that? The card still pending. Then I look at that, it's Lego. 7-year-old. So what does that? I mean, we can have a good laugh in the morning, but what does that mean in the future? We will become a consumerist society. No more producing. So if you do not get your digital economy space right, if you do not move towards, sorry, I sound a little bit of Japanese, like Nihonji, if you do not move towards the society 5.0 properly, please be prepared to be a colony of a digital power, meaning which you lose sovereignty. And this is a real thing. That's why day and night, some people ask me, hey, boss, you are the chairman, why are you in the office every day? Even my colleagues started feeling the heat a little bit. I told them I'm not a curry puff chairman. I'm here with a passion to drive the digital economy for the many, for the country. And we must get it right. AI, artificial intelligence, for instance, is such a powerful tool. It can, with the right algorithm, can predict, can react, can respond, can suggest things. Let's take a car. When you drive a car, you have blind spots, right? Yes. With AI, with the sensors and everything, it will tell you, hey, you cannot go this side, you cannot go this side, something is coming, or at least there will be a trigger. These are very low-level AI. Imagine how the AI will work in a big way. And some will start asking, oh, then you are surrendering your life to the machines. I said, please don't watch too much of I'm Back, what we call Terminator. I think they get so confused by watching Hollywood movies. AI is basically based on input, and it acts based on the parameters that are already well defined. It doesn't have the ability of human being to self-taught. You know what I mean? So that's why I think I appeal to everyone, whoever is watching this, if you are the government servant or government or administration or the ministers responsible for this, also my MDAC colleague, and also everyone in this space. Please, let's do something good for the country, for the nation, for the people, for the many, not for the few.
Thanks, Dr. Rice. I think soon your son will know your credit card CVC number, which is what, 909 or 904 or something. Okay, next will be Jivan, talk about what's the requirement for a country to achieve Society 5.0.
I think with this pandemic, the world has become much more flatter. You can't say the Europeans are far more advanced than the Asia Pacific markets or the ASEAN markets. You can't say the Americans are far advanced compared to us. So the pandemic is actually an opportunity that has made the world much more flatter. It also is an opportunity for Malaysia to see what do we need to reset and reset fast. And I think Malaysia is well poised for that. Why? Because like Doctor said, we've got the digital infrastructure in place right now. Now, somehow we got distracted by a lot of other things over the last couple of years. We now need to go back to see what the government, together with the enterprise, can serve the citizen better. And how we typically do that in TCS, in all the other countries that we operate, we typically work very closely with the government and see how we put the community and society first. What can we give them back? How do we move the needle in making their life much more easier, better? Then once we've done it in Malaysia, then we can talk about it in the region. But doing it is something we have to do now, because the pandemic is here. If level playing field is almost equal for every country, it is now the first mover advantage that Malaysia has right now in what we can accelerate better to Society 5.0. So what does a Society 5.0 means? It's just coupling all this technology to bring better way of living. And also we should start measuring something which we never measure, which is the happiness index. The happiness index of our community and society is equally important, because we tend to measure profit index, but we forget to measure about citizen happiness index. So if we can start measuring happiness index and how we can bring sustainable propositions to the larger, to the less fortunate in a community through means of digital or Society 5.0, then we're making strides. But Malaysia is well poised for it right now. We cannot ask for a better time to leapfrog right now. Why? Because every country is in the same boat. There's no model to learn from. Every country is affected by a pandemic. You can't say follow the European model or the American models or any model. We set the new benchmark. We have to be the pathfinder for it. And I think for the first time in history of human civilization, we are really poised to be the pathfinder in Society 5.0 in ASEAN.
Okay, thanks, Juven. Your Excellency, Ambassador, what's your thoughts on the requirement for a country to achieve Society 5.0?
Well, I think a couple of the things are needed to get the society afloat for the Society 5.0. One is firstly the connectivity infrastructure. Then because the Society 5.0 depends on the huge volumes of data. And so the internet connectivity, nationwide internet connectivity is a kind of the necessary requirement. And I think that the government of Malaysia is moving toward the good directions, but now they are putting emphasis on the nationwide, the 4G networks. This is a kind of the good prerequisite for the society to move toward the 5.0. And we are also supporting by putting in place a submarine cable, the connections to Malaysia, then by the connecting submarine cable network with the local, the internet network. So we expect that the speed and capacity of the internet, the capability would be hugely enhanced. So this is one thing. And secondly, the data flow is again vital, the ingredient for the Society 5.0. So let the data freely shared. But at the same time, of course, we are aware that the data flows needs to take care of the certain elements. For instance, what about the privacy? What about the security protection of the cyberspace? So perhaps we need to put in place a kind of global governance to make sure that the free flow of the data will be done, but at the same time, they put in place necessary kind of the safeguard measures to protect the privacy and etc. And thirdly, about the educations, empowering the human capacity is very much, again, vital for making use. Each and every society needs to make use of the benefits of the digital technologies. Nobody should not be left behind. So education is a very much crucial element. We place high confidence in the education level in Malaysia because while there are so many Japanese businesses already operating here, because they are watching the very much high quality of the Malaysians, the local talents. So we very much place full confidence in the education, the requirements. And fourthly, as I said, that this new service needs to be provided by the private businesses. So we have to put in place a certain enabling ecosystems which enables this new business will be providing services. The COVID-19, yes, well, this is a very much disruptive, the situation. So what stage you are in, that's not necessarily, decisive, when we discuss a way forward. For instance, in Cambodia, of course, if I'm allowed to say, the relatively less developed than Malaysia, as for the first time, they introduced the digital currencies by central bank. And then now the JICA, which is a kind of the assistance organization, is now helping the circulations or this digital currency by putting in place the application so that even the people living in the remote area have an access to these financial services. Again, this will kind of contribute to make sure the inclusiveness will take place. Why not Malaysia? Malaysia is very much far advanced in terms of the physical infrastructure, the education level. So we very much hope to see Malaysia leaping forward in terms of the moving toward the Society 5.0. And we recognize that there is a very much the eagerly they're looking the Asian businesses. Again, putting in place the certain digital based services. So we are now promoting the alliance between the Japanese business and this kind of the Asian business, so that they can put in place a certain demonstration project, so that people can know the benefits occurring from the digital technologies. We have identified several demonstration projects, so that I hope that soon the actual achievement of the demonstration project will be known, so that will further propel our move toward the Society 5.0.
Thanks, sir. Sir, the two panelists, they talk about how COVID-19 has accelerated the need for Society 5.0. Maybe you can just briefly explain, Your Excellency.
Oh, me?
Yes.
I'm a very much of the anacro type of persons. I never thought of myself using teleconference or virtual conference or being here in this kind of setting. But I'm forced to because of COVID-19. But once you start using the teleconferences, then it's pretty, the convenient and useful. And then, well, well, I don't know what may unfold in the future about the COVID-19 situations, but this is quite convenient. We can put in place a certain participants from Japan or from other places into the web conferences. So I think although this COVID-19 is a very much worrying things, but at the same time, in terms of the disruptions which is sometimes needed for us to leap forward in terms of applying the digital technology, I think COVID-19 is kind of providing us, in a sense, the good opportunities to move forward.
Rice, will you prefer this kind of setup or a real setup where there's a live audience? You look like a person who thrives with live audience, not really in a digital audience. So, yeah.
You see, whether live or not, the most important thing is the messaging. The narratives must be right. Unprecedented times requires unprecedented measures. It cannot be precedented. So I've been on this kind of program many times the last few months, and explaining what we need to do, what we must do. If we fail to do, we'll end up becoming a digital colony. I think you are right. We are talking about the use of data for the greater good of the people. I think Society 5.0 is our destination. We must embrace it. 4IR is already there. I mean, if you're not there, then you have a big problem. Talking about happiness index, I also have a different cap. I do lead a think tank in Malaysia, and we measure National Worry Index. Essentially, it's the reverse of the happiness index. So when we look at the National Worry Index, particularly the last 3 quarters, it has gone up because of so many uncertainties, this and that. But having said that, I always say that unprecedented times, you cannot solve the problem with precedented ways. You must think out of the box, bringing these farmers, bringing these fishermen into the platform. This is something that we must do today. I remember I visited one farming area in Cameron Highland, and they brought me. I was in my car, then I parked the car somewhere. Then I got into a Pajero which has no registration number, and then it went up the hill, and the car was skidding left, right, because it's quite wet, and the roads are like basically jungle road. And I was holding my heart outside my body. because there's deep ravine left, right, center. And then they asked me to pick up some vegetables there. And then he came down again. This time they don't use the brake to control. They use the handbrake and the gear to control. Again, this time my kidney was also outside my body. And then we reached, then I said, boss, tell me the purpose of you bringing me here. I can always get these vegetables everywhere. He said, boss, we just need two things from the government. We don't need their money. What we need is, please help us with the infrastructure. The simple, that you put the stone so that it'll be better traction. Number two, please address the supply chain. Because once we bring down the vegetable risking our life, our Slayang mafias, they come here, Slayang wholesale mafia come here, they will determine the price according to whims and fancy. If it's 5 ringgit per kilo, say for chili, they'll just say, today I want to give you 1 ringgit. I have no, and then the farmers, remember, they work hard. They take money from people, they loan money, and at the end of the day, they succumb to these kind of things. So I think digitization and digitalization, creating the supply chain for them will help a lot. So when you talk about equitable, just society, digital inclusiveness, very nice words. Cannot we make it happen? This is where MDEC has to play a role. I always tell the people in MDEC, guys, you are here for a purpose, not just to eat curry puff and coffee. You are here for a purpose. The purpose is to better serve the people so the people's life will be improved. So we are very committed now to drive the Society 5.0, and we will engage with anyone, everyone, from the government to non-governmental organization to industry. My office is open all the time. I'm also there on Saturdays. So we have to. If we don't, then be prepared to go back to Kunta Kinte years, where we lose our sovereignty and we'll become slaves.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Rice. You mentioned about basic infrastructure. So my next question for all three panelists is that will the world be divided into between countries that has already achieved Society 5.0 and country that is still struggling with basic infrastructure? Start with Jivan.
I think the world will see a huge paradigm shift. A paradigm shift in future in the next 15 to 20 years. We know by now what happens in China impacts Malaysia, impacts Europe, impacts America. So we can't forcibly in the future say what I do in my country will have no impact to the global society. The borders have come down significantly right now. What we do in Malaysia, what America does, what Europe does, what Japan does, has huge impact to the global society. And I think we as Malaysians, we need to start thinking as global citizens. No more Malaysian citizens, but global citizens. What do we do for sustainability from a global citizen perspective? What are we doing from climate change perspective? What are we doing for the poverty people in the country? So what we do in each country will have a global impact. We're no more staying in an island by itself. That, I think the pandemic has made it very clear to all of us, to all leaders of the world, United Nations. The pandemic has made it very clear that you live in a global society. Whatever I do has an impact on you and to other countries, number one. Number two, you will see a paradigm shift about organizations and company moving more to sustainable economics. What do you mean by sustainable economics? Like Society 5.0, very inclusive of the poor people or the down-stricken people. You'll be looking into a lot of climate-based solutions coming out of it. Now, you're also going to see point 3, people are just not going to work for profit. The new model of society, the youngsters today don't want to work 9 to 5. The youngsters today are looking for a sense of purpose. What does this organization stand for? What is the purpose of this organization? What are we doing for the community at large? So you're going to see a new trend of people coming into society right now. And the 9 to 5 working and all of that will probably get rehashed. They'll ask you, is this company for profit or is this company for people and planet? These are the questions that the youngsters are going to start asking. And we're going to get ourselves prepared for it. And like I said, Malaysia as well as TCS have been investing a lot in Malaysia because we believe Malaysia is well poised for all of this. We truly believe that we can move the needle for the citizens here, not only for Malaysia, but also make this into a beacon house for the region. We should challenge ourselves. Can we be the beacon house for the region? And the problem is time is running out for us.
Okay.
I think with the outgoing President Trump, multilateralism was dead because it was always unilateralism, America first, and all those mumbo jumbo. With the President-elect Biden, he has promised to restore multilateralism. So United Nations championed its SDGs, Societal Development Goals, for many, many years. Under outgoing President Trump, that is dead. So now, hopefully, with Joe Biden in, hopefully this thing will be restored, number one. Number two, as far as interconnectedness, interdependence, I think Jivan clearly put it, right? With not only just pandemic, even before that, we already see pandemic just fast-tracked it, accelerated it. And we have no choice to embrace it, to get it done. As he put it again, Malaysia is very well poised. What do we not have? We have infrastructure, we have talented people. Some of the MDEC guys, if you come to the office, they're amazing guys. There's one guy in the field of agro-tech, for instance. When he speaks, it's not him talking, it's the chili is talking, it's the pineapple that is talking. It is that shrimp start dancing. So these are the passionate people, young people, and I believe in young talents. Although age is a state of mind, I consider myself always as young. But the important thing is that I honestly believe in young talent. They are very passionate. As he put again, things have changed. It's no longer the old past. You cannot use mid-80s solution for 2020, 2021 problems.
Yes.
Things have changed remarkably. And if you don't be part of the change, you will be changed.
Yes.
So that is the important thing. And again, I'm blessed in MDEC that I have amazing talents among the junior and the middle and also the seniors that can propel. I'll just quote one minister, Hairi Jamaluddin. He did say that we've lost 20 years in the digital economy space. We had 25 years ahead, but we lost 20 years because at one time we were just focusing on project management and event management. We gave goodie bags and we smile. Politicians take photos. We are so happy. But how does this impact on the people on ground?
Yeah.
That we couldn't care less at that point of time. Now MDEC will have reinvented. We've talked about reinventing MDEC, and we are going towards the Society 5.0, which we call Malaysia 5.0. It will be contextualized in the Malaysian context. But yes, if you don't do it, be prepared to be slaves.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Rice. Your Excellency Ambassador. We got less than 2 minutes. Maybe, just less than 2 minutes.
Okay. The human-centered, the society is kind of the central goal of the Society 5.0. But the human-centered society need not be within the single country context, but the global context. The interesting statistics we have is that now in Africa, 40% of the people have an access to internet. And even among the 20% of the poor strata of the African people, still 7 out of 10 people have an access to or the mobile phones or smartphones. And in Kenya, already or services are being put in place so that the people who don't have a bank account are able to use the mobile phone-based services to have an access to financial services. In Rwanda, again, the drone, delivering kind of the blood for transfusions or necessary commodities. So I think that we are in a very good start lines to move forward. And I talked briefly about the Cambodian case. And so we are in a kind of the situations to move forward by the government, the policies, the business efforts, and also the people's awareness. So we are very much optimistic about given the very much favorable the environment Malaysia is in.
Okay, thank you very much. We got 30 seconds more. I'll wrap up everything. Okay, what I learned today is we shouldn't be afraid of society 5.0, and I shouldn't be watching Terminator because it seems to give too much. It seems to give a different perspective to artificial intelligence. And with that, thank you very much for your insightful
Thank you, Philip.
thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip.
Yep.
Thank you, Dato'.
Bye bye, everybody.
We hope you have enjoyed the opening power panel as much as we did. Thank you so much to Ambassador Oka, Dato' Dr. Haji Rais Hussein, Jeevan, and Philip for such a great and insightful discussion. I particularly like the fact that we had so many different perspectives from different regions on how we're going to move forward as opposed to apathy. So I think that's something very valuable. It was most definitely a great honor for us to have you here. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker will shed some light on how, by embracing technology and transforming legacy business processes, enterprises will not only be able to meet but exceed market demands, customer expectations, as well as increase overall business efficiency and agility. He is the managing director of our exclusive terabyte partner, FusionX Group. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Jacob Isaac.
Good morning. My name is Jacob, and I'm the Managing Director of FusionX, a leading player in analytics and AI. Today, I'm excited to share with you about how we can reinvent your businesses. At the end of this sharing, I would like to go through in terms of some of the challenges and how we can overcome those challenges in terms of digitalizing our businesses. 200 years ago, 90% of the world's population worked in agriculture. Today, only 2% of the world's population works in agriculture. We know that change is inevitable. We say it, we know it, but yet we fear it simply because we don't practice it enough. You're never really afraid of something if you practice enough of it. Same goes with embracing digital technologies like analytics and AI. If you practice the usage of technologies enough, we wouldn't fear the changes that come with it. COVID-19 has taken the world by surprise. No one was prepared for this. The virus just arrived and disrupted the livelihood of everyone. Farmers, factory workers, professionals, business owners, SME owners, large enterprises, housewives, students, teachers, everyone. It has forced us to rethink our social and business activities. No one has been spared. But clearly, entities that are digitalized are suffering less in comparison. The good news is people are starting to take digital transformation a lot more seriously right now. Microsoft cited many companies whose digitalization plans, originally poised for 2 to 3 years, were accelerated for execution within just months. If you look at the top global companies and their lifespan and see how that has changed rapidly. In 1964, the top S&P 500 companies had a projected lifespan tenure of about 33 years. In 2016, the top 500 companies have a tenure of about only 24 years. That's close to a 30% reduction. That's huge. And in 2027, wow, S&P 500 companies only have a tenure of about 12 years. That's really short for a corporate lifespan. So question for us, if the big boys can't keep up, what makes us think that our SMEs, our businesses can survive? Constant change is the new normal. We might not know it, but most of us practice inertia. We don't like change. It makes us uncomfortable, not knowing what to expect. In short, we like things to remain. What do businesses want? What do they really want? They want predictability. We are always looking for certainty, and change contradicts exactly that. Alas, in life, we have to embrace change. We have to enjoy changes because it is the only way to move forward. To hope that life will not change is impossible. The only way to improve is if you enjoy changes. Look at how shopping has changed. The growth of e-commerce is amazing. This is the new retail experience. It's almost unbelievable that e-commerce represents close to 15% of global spend today. Close to 15% of global spend is huge. A deeper dive shows us that global e-commerce is doubling every 5 years. But what's more interesting is Southeast Asia is growing by 8 times in 8 years. This is where the action is. This is where the market is. Today, if you trade, whether in products, raw material, or services, you are challenged globally. If you want to run a successful business, it has to be cross-border. Even if you wanted to compete locally and be jago kampong, you'll be challenged by overseas vendors and suppliers every day, all the time. If you think about cross-border, if you think about trading overseas, and you want to compete with the best in international waters, you have to compete with speed. And are we fast enough? Are we quick enough to adapt to changes? It is important that we can adapt to technological changes, not just quickly, but with precision as well. Because if not, we are out there for a knockout. So what do we do? What are the pillars of digitalization? What are the challenges? Where do we start? What are the pillars that we should focus on first? Arguably, there are 4 pillars of digitalization. You can start anywhere in no particular sequence, but you will need all to be done to have a sound digital business. Pillar number 1, engage with your customers. It won't be much use if you've got digital platforms, but nobody knows about it. You need to engage your customers, market your platforms, reach out and let the world know you have a world-class digital highway. This can be done most effectively using AI-powered digital marketing, not just the traditional methods, but the new methods. Pillar number 2, you must cultivate an internal culture that is digitalized. If not, it will all fall apart very quickly externally, as this goes hand in hand. Internal productivity will be heightened with digital platforms like video conferencing tools, shared drives, document processing applications. Pillar number 3, change the way you sell. Today, establishing multi-channels is extremely important. If sales cannot be done online, you're in trouble. Collaborate with e-commerce players or build your own e-store. Or better, do both. Be sure to build websites, mobile apps, enabling all channels, firing all cylinders to sell your products and services. Make it available online 24/7. Make it always on. Pillar number 4, make better decisions using analytics and AI. Once you have data flowing through the veins of the organization, you must leverage on analytics and AI to make unbiased decisions based on real-time data. Almost all renowned publications would tell you that only companies embracing AI and analytics will differentiate themselves from competition, and they will be the one that will be sustainable. Now, whilst you think that you have a competent team to work on this, and I'm sure you do, I highly encourage that you work with partners, because digitalization is not an easy feat. There are challenges lurking in every corner. So trying to overcome them will either derail your company from its core business focus or demoralize your team altogether when coming head-on with these challenges. One must remember, you're in the business of selling your products and services, not running IT. And the items in these slides really looks like a full-time job. You will always face budget constraints, security, compliance, processes, networking issues. The list just goes on. It is better to work with trusted IT partners to ensure that you are working with teams who have the economies of scale and experience to minimize failure points and avoid unnecessary costs. So whilst the road ahead is not a walk in the park, but one thing is for sure, doing nothing is a really bad idea. Doing nothing is a really bad idea. Make no mistake, the digital run is a race we are all forced to compete in. This is essential, not optional. And it's not just about precision, it's about speed as well. If you believe in digital platforms, e-stores, and going online, you may have half the battle won. But then again, one might ask, why do we need AI and analytics? This is because the amount of data that we generate and we create is so much faster than what we humans can process. So we are unable and inefficient to process that amount of data with that kind of speed. We need the assistance of machines. Talk about data science. Data is knowledge when processed correctly. How much data can be stored today in computers, hard drives? And how does this compare with the regular human mind? Take, for example, how big is an exabyte? How big is that? We all hear about exabytes, petabytes, terabytes, but actually, how big is really an exabyte? The answer is 10 to the power of 18. And 10 to the power of 18 is a big number, but hard to comprehend. Let's put that number to some context. The Library of Congress is the world's largest library in size. But how big is this? It is more than 164 million items, 3.6 million recordings, 14 million photographs, 5.5 million maps, 838 miles of bookshelves, and so on and so forth. That altogether combined times 100,000 times of text information is how big 1 exabyte is. All that information times 100,000 times is how big 1 exabyte is. Now imagine a computer model that can consume all that data to process and understand and make sense out of those data sets to provide a prescription, a recommendation for your businesses. How powerful is that? How powerful is AI when it has no limit in processing exabytes and petabytes of data with speed and accuracy? So what are the pillars of AI? What do we have as part of the pillars of AI? Number 1, computer vision. There are tons of applications using video analytics today, looking at directions of vehicles, people walking towards which zones, crowd density, facial recognition, traffic control. There are just so many different use cases. You can look at directions, you can look at speed, you can look at areas that are supposed to be isolated. You can move crowd around because you are able to recognize crowd behavior, density, direction, velocity. There are tons of applications that we can use computer vision with. There are just so many use cases in businesses. We can track crowd, we can understand their behavior, what are they looking, what are they buying, what are their demographics, what are their personalization habits. So how does AI really work? How does it work? It sounds magical, but in reality, it's actually quite simple. If you think about AI, it's all about inputting raw data. So if you're trying to teach the computer to understand what is a banana, what is a mango, what is an apple, so fruits essentially, what you do is you load in a bunch of data, to be more specific, images of these fruits into a computer algorithm and teach it and state that this is an apple, this is a banana, this is a mango. The computer will train itself based on its modeling capabilities to understand, to differentiate an apple from an orange or an apple from a mango. And after that processing, which can take days, weeks, or hours, depending on computer resources, it is able to now identify what exactly is an apple, what is a mango, what is a banana. If that is not good enough, if precision is not there, load in 1,000 images, load in 10,000 images, 100,000 images, I bet the computer is now better than any one of us to identify what is an apple because of its knowledge base, which is limitless. So there you go. You can analyze foot traffic in stores, facial recognition for personalization, and targeted marketing. Just drive your creativity wild as to how to use this very mature technology to your advantage. Today, AI can recognize voice input, which is pillar number 2, transforming it to plain text for text recognition. How is it done? You load in sound waves, going through the neural network to understand how to say hello in different slangs, in different languages, and the output is text. It can recognize speech, converting it to text to analyze text. Well, we use this all the time with Google Speech, Siri, etc. We do that all the time. How can we help? So thinking about all these different technologies, you can combine it with NLP as well to help you better understand your data. So where the computer understands not just words, but contextual meaning of time, date, places, even slangs, accents, and expressions. So there you have it all. AI today capable of computer vision, speech recognition, language analysis, and the ability to process an unlimited array of knowledge. What does this mean? Effectively, if you embrace AI and analytics into your business, your businesses would come alive as AI would give it eyes, ears, speech, and brain power to process and recommend the next best course of action. So what are the challenges businesses face today in the wake of digital transformation? There are just so many. But I thought I'll share with you some of the top 4. And these are the top 4. Number 1, it's difficult to acquire and retain skilled resources, IT-savvy personnel. Why? Because they want to touch the latest technologies, disruptive technologies, and retention is tough because they easily get bored. They want high salaries. So SMEs could have a challenge with this in terms of salary packages, in terms of workspaces, etc. So talent is a big challenge. Number 2, there's always a budget constraint. Limited budgets and lack of access to funds is always going to be a challenge. So if we don't have enough funds in the organization, it's hard to have good credit ratings, weak cash flows, low balance sheets, which enable us to actually propel the business to the next level. I think what we are trying to do over here is trying to get loans sometimes, to get grants, to drive the business to the next level, but that's always going to be challenging if our credit ratings or our businesses are in a challenging position from a financial point of view. Next is limited access to suitable digital technology. Now, it's not that we don't have options. In fact, we have a lot of options, too many options. Most businesses today cannot afford, and they don't have the knowledge to implement and adopt these kind of technologies, which comes in abundance. And every one of these items, whether collaborative tools whether it's security tools, productive tools, or whether it's e-store, or whether it's marketplaces, we have all these options in abundance. So how do you choose which one is suitable for your business? How do you choose right from wrong? That remains as a challenge, because a wrong move could result in bad outcomes. And last but not least is actually limited market reach, limited market access. So most businesses today, no doubt they have a good product, they've got a good line of services, but they don't know how to use a multi-channel approach to reach out to new leads, to new geographies, to new markets, to expand their products beyond their current horizon. They don't know how to use AI-powered digital marketing technologies to attract customers, to bring them on board their digital platforms. So that is challenge number 4. So amidst these different challenges, this is where the partnerships are critical. Partners like FusionX offers the ability to accelerate utilization of new disruptive technologies like analytics and AI, allowing businesses to focus on the businesses, while FusionX takes care of digitalization and technologies. Why FusionX? We transform what if to what's next for every businesses. We do a lot of different things, a lot of different use cases, but at the end of the day, our primary focus comes in twofold, one or the other, or both. Number 1 is to help you increase your sales. And we are very confident to use AI and analytics and digital technologies to help you increase your sales, your revenue by strong double digits. Number 2, if we don't want to or we can't increase your sales, then it's about reducing your costs. And that again, we are extremely confident to reduce your costs by strong double digits. And we will use new digital technologies, AI and analytics to help you achieve this while you focus on your businesses. In terms of the platform, FusionX comes readily available with a product and platform known as FusionX Giant. So over here, we have the different pillars. In terms of the multiple platforms, you probably already have some of these on the far left in your organization, 1 or more, 3 of them or 10 of them in the form of Oracle, IBM, CRM, Siebel, etc. We have developed ready connectors to all these different data sources. So whether it's connectivity to SAP, to Oracle, to IBM, to Microsoft, we have these connectors which we can connect to your data sources or even external data sources to process the data and to provide recommendations on how to boost your sales or reduce operational inefficiencies. All these solutions can be hosted on the cloud, on hybrid, and it's on multiple form factors. So it can be on a laptop, desktop, your mobile phones, as it supports HTML5. So these are really accelerators that's part of the products today. This diagram shows you that we are not limited to just relational databases. We can connect to various IoT protocols such as Modbus, BACnet, SNMP, CAN bus, ZigBee, and many other industrial standards. Again, we are not limited to these connectors, and it can extend with justification, with business justification. The data store and management layer covers all the management of metadata, resource management, storage optimization, methodologies using machine learning, stream processing, search engines, NLP, just to name a few. Industry templates and models is one of FusionX's most unique selling points, as we have retail templates, e-commerce templates, manufacturing templates, financial services templates, and so many others. So that when you start the journey of analytics and AI, you don't start from ground zero. We can bootstrap as we know what KPIs and measures would your line of business typically look at, what predictive models you would use, what use cases you would find most relevant. Have you ever been in a situation where you launch a business intelligence project, an analytics initiative, and you don't know where to start? What are the use cases? What are the data points? What are the KPIs? What are the templates to look at? And it's just so hard to start from ground zero. With FusionX, you will not experience any of those headaches because we bootstrap you with something which is a bit of a raw template, but able to customize, scale up, and scale down according to your needs, according to your businesses. Now, this accelerates your implementation substantially and lowers down your risk of failure. Again, analytics layers come ready with industrial templates and also comes with a full spectrum of offerings, including alerts, monitoring, case management, workflow, the list just goes on. So an example of some of the most well-known use cases, most widely used models in the FusionX repertoire includes business influencers, where we help you understand what affects your businesses most. Chatbots, imagine using chatbots to enhance your customer services. Customer segregation, understand your customers a bit better in terms of profile, spend patterns, and their needs, and upcoming needs as well. Imagine that you could forecast revenue, foot traffic. Imagine you could simulate what effects there would be if you choose to drop your price, if you choose to raise your price or drop your price, or hire more people, or open up more branches. What if models are so powerful to assist decisions? Looking at machine learning, that's the new word for artificial intelligence, and you will have a machine that is constantly learning and growing in your businesses to help predict and prescribe next course of actions. Again, industry templates are very welcome over here, and we have all this in abundance, depending on which industry you are in. So you would be able to start from somewhere, not from nowhere. So what do you think? Does your firm look at change as an opportunity or something unfortunate? What does the future look like for you, to you? We always say that if we only knew that extra piece of information, we would have changed our business decision. We would have changed the course of action, and the direction of the business could be substantially different. And it's so hard to rewind to the past, but with analytics and AI, it gives you an insight to the potential future, to the prospective future, and that is very powerful. So to give you insight to what could potentially happen allows you to make better, well-informed decisions before it happens. So again, these are the pillars of digitalization. Where do you start? Where should you start? It's totally up to you. And it doesn't mean that you have to do sequentially. You can run in parallel. You can take things one at a time. But again, make no mistake, all pillars has to be completed. But there is a wise saying, a journey of 1,000 steps begins with the first step. So take one step at a time, but move fast. Remember, time is of essence, especially in this era where speed matters. So I thank you for your attention. And if you'd like to onboard the digital transformation journey or get on a free trial or try and see what analytics and AI can help you in your businesses, what it can do to increase your revenue or reduce your costs, feel free to get in touch. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a pleasant digital transformation journey.
Thank you very much, Jacob. That was indeed a very interesting presentation. In a world full of uncertainty, data can give you some sort of way in order to move forward, and that's great. By the way, we have great news. We're ahead of time. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna give you guys break until 10:45 so you can absorb all that you have already learned or go to the toilet or grab a cup of coffee. So we'll be back soon at 10:45. I'll be looking forward to seeing all of you. Bye. Hi, welcome back. Hope you had a really good break and hope that coffee tastes delicious. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are entering the first thematic track of the program, the Smart City track, which is powered by PWC. And to open the session, our keynote speaker will raise some important points for consideration by businesses and policymakers to push smart city debates beyond the confines of physical infrastructure developments. This includes how local governments and corporates can engage citizens in shaping innovation and reimagining cities of the future across interconnected virtual communities. And he will be taking questions. So please, wherever you're tuning in from, just drop your questions down in the comment box and then he will address them at the end of his session or maybe in the middle. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the Chief Digital Officer of PWC Malaysia, Mr. Michael Graham.
Good morning. As Myra suggested, my name is Michael Graham. I am the Chief Digital Officer of PwC in Malaysia and in Vietnam. And a little bit of a spoiler alert, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do the full smart cities concept justice in the next 30 minutes. However, what we will cover, again, as Myra threatens, is a conversation around how we balance the intangible and the tangible part of the infrastructure of smart cities. Something that PwC stands very dear to on a trust agenda. This is not simply about pipes and antennas and networks. This is much more around policy and ethics and privacy. So I will be taking questions. Please feel free to put them into the WebEx chat as we go. We'll try and keep about 5 minutes towards the end for those questions. Just before we kick off, obviously I stand in your living room, as it were, during this whole COVID era. It is somewhat strange, but perhaps it is this new normal, although that is a phrase that I'm slowly starting to hate. Maybe one of the things we should do is some sort of collage around what the alternative phrases for the new normal should be, or the Great Reset or something like that. Regardless of the pandemic, I think smart cities does represent one of the most important waves of change that we will face during the next 100 years or so during the 21st century. I think fundamentally getting our arms around how we integrate and interact as humans with our environment, be it a city or a suburban area, is going to be fundamental to the sustainability of those cities, not least with the whole ESG agenda and net zero seems to place a huge emphasis on, not just sustainable cities, and we'll talk later in the panel around safe cities, but fundamentally, perhaps the overarching umbrella to all of that is the concept of smart cities. So I'm just working my way through the clicker buttons. Fundamentally, let me just start with some numbers. And again, a little bit of a warning, this slide deck does have quite a few numbers as we go through this. About 55% of the world's population live in urban areas today. The UN forecasts that number will grow to nearly 68%, or 2/3 of the world's population. So consider, of the 9.8 billion people living in urban areas, the ASEAN region alone, we're imagining 90 million incremental people arriving in urban areas by 2030. That's only 8 years' time. The lands that represents from an urban area will double. And governments will necessarily need to spend extraordinary numbers to make sure that the infrastructure necessary is adequate. That moves well beyond the basic hygiene of sanitation and access and transport. And it requires us, obviously, to be way more integrated in the way that we interact with the city. My clicker. And that starts really the run of extraordinary numbers. As you can see on this slide, globally, every number either includes a billion or a trillion. And I just draw out, the forecasted spend on smart cities initiatives by 2022, next year, is estimated to be 158 billion US dollars. Regionally, we have our own set of astronomical numbers, and India perhaps paves the way with at least 14 billion US dollars worth of spend just in the last 5 years to smarten up, as it were, 100 cities across their nation. The forecast total value of that smart city market is an eye-watering 800 billion. And those value pools range from not just the infrastructure individuals who might lay the cable or erect the tower, but everyone who partakes in that, from the ecosystem player to the platform, to the plugin, to the transport enabler. And the value pools are so extraordinarily large that we've been talking about this subject for nearly 25 years. So why, I suppose, are we still talking about this subject, and why are we even more interested in the rankings, perhaps on the far right-hand side? And I think that's as a result of 2 or 3 things. One is the combination of technology and infrastructure coming to a level of maturity that allows us to actually leverage the opportunity that's presented. One is us as humans being more acceptable to being tracked. And I don't mean that in a sort of George Orwell 1984 environment. I mean for the greater good. So with a MySajatra being able to help with some of the contact tracing during the COVID world, being able to optimize bus routes or even transport at scale requires us to know who we are and where we are and what we're doing and where we're moving towards. The one thing I would say is a bit of a health warning. These numbers vary greatly. These numbers, if you compared and contrasted like for like, also still vary greatly. And as perhaps most interesting is where we just talk about Shanghai, which I think last week was named the smartest city at the City Expo World Congress. It is a city with 24 million people. It has 205 individual towns within that city. There are 33 government departments. There are 99 subcommittees. That is not just a city. Those are a collection of provinces or environments or communities. And for me, that forms the bedrock. So any ranking that talks to a smart city, number 1 or number 81 or number 58 or indeed number 93 needs to be taken with a certain pinch of salt in order for us to actually focus in on what matters. I think the days of rankings are behind us and we should be focusing on outcomes. One of the things that we published back in May last year was an approach to how to become a more connected or a smarter city. So it's a PWC report. It effectively talks to 3 tiers. And that is as much as a guidepost for anyone embarking on a smart city environment or a smart city strategy. And before I describe each of the 3 tiers as you're reading them, let me just give you some context. And I suppose it is rare for us to talk about a competitor's publication, but Roland Berger came up with an interesting study that surveyed 1,000 cities, those 500 above a million, 500 below a million. And they came to the conclusion that only 149 of those cities had a smart city strategy. I'll just let that sink in. Of the 500 smart cities, cities with a population of greater than 1 million, only 5 had a smart city strategy that Roland Berger considered comprehensive with an implementable plan associated to it. So there is still an extraordinarily long way to go, which is why I think we felt very comfortable describing ways and means, perhaps a guidepost or a path forward for cities to consider how they do develop. This is not obviously click your fingers and your city is smart. This is an extraordinary journey. Look no further than Seoul in Korea, who've been considering this particular process since 1975. The tiers that I'm describing can be considered at a sector level. So it could be about sanitation, or it could be about lighting, or it could be a transport, or it could be about security. Or you can consider it at a sort of precinct or a community level. Tier 1 is very transactional. You contract as government and private sector to solve a problem. Smart parking, classic example. There is a services relationship, and that is the end of it. Tier 2 evolves and matures that conversation a little bit more towards having a revenue share model or a public-private partnership model where there is mutual benefits, and that allows some cross-fertilization or pollination of a transaction with another transaction. So the example cited is mobile transit payment cards. The opportunity to load money onto a stored value card and then to use that across different modes of transport has existed with Oyster and Octopus in London and Hong Kong, respectively, for a long time. But the principle of being able to link that stored value to transport and then relate that perhaps digitally on your phone to the next best option from a transport perspective represents a sort of a beyond longitudinal data is perhaps how I'd describe it. Tier 3 is even more interesting, and it really talks to the sort of buzzwords that we've been hearing around ecosystem and platforms. This is the concept where the actual outcome may be a factor of multiple inputs. So the consideration there is as much around being able to think about the wider relationship, and perhaps it's a smart lighting activity that needs to be deployed, but the sensors that are put into those smart lighting, those street furniture, if you will, actually serves so many different purposes. And the players involved in that are encouraged to innovate, not quite knowing at the point of installation what the revenue opportunity, what the ultimate purpose might be, but being willing and encouraged to invest in that effort, time, to erect and commission all of those bits of hardware for a purpose yet to be fully understood. And I think what you might see is, as you read the report in your own time, is how you can develop a smart city environment that plays to these tracks. But it does need to tie back to tangible benefits. And to my Roland Berger point, it is not as simple as simply putting the word smart in front of a series of nouns, be it government, mobility, people, or living. I think fundamentally a smart acid test needs to think way more about what the consumer, the citizen, or the user of that particular service feels, experiences, and how it goes about its benefits. Some of which will be tangible, revenue, some of which will be experiential. How does that individual feel that there's a safer city around? A good example of that might be in Seoul with the Owl Bus initiative for those individuals going home late at night on shift work, perhaps. They analyzed 3 billion bits of data to optimize the route. And a handful of years later, they're now safely transporting 10,000 people a night through those routes on those buses. And it is evolving. So those routes adapt based on how the suburbs evolve and where the demand and the supply needs to then marriage. Oh, crikey. There are countless examples. I've just talked you through the Seoul Owl Bus example. There's one in Darwin, and I had the opportunity to speak to Josh Statler, who runs that particular smart city initiatives. He describes it as giving a city a voice. There's 3 things perhaps I would draw on the Darwin example. One is the scooters, which we all see here in Kuala Lumpur and elsewhere in cities, have a series of sensors in there. Two particular ones I draw attention to. One is to measure shade, or at least heat, such that the city can start working out how to manage shade. And obviously that has an application here in Kuala Lumpur with our not only the sun, but also the rain aspect to it. So that's one set of sensors that have already been placed into those scooters. The second one is the undulation of the scooter according to those routes. So being able to imagine being able to put a map of where those scooters go and using that for reactive or indeed preventative maintenance on the pavements or the sidewalks that consumers use and need, and without having to walk around, huge amounts of perhaps protruding roots from trees or broken slab stones. And perhaps just with reference to my warning at the beginning, there are countless examples. One thing for me, at least, that remains constant for all of these is the desire to move beyond longitudinal data. And I referenced that in the Darwin example. So this is taking referential data or first-party data, that primary data that a sensor throws off, and being able to factor it into other sources, perhaps third-party data that people are sharing, in order to infer or at least establish different sets of facts for your hypothesis to go and test. That, for me, represents this playground that I know Jacob was talking about, from drawing out some of those data insights from the Fusion X piece, but being able to actually get knowledge based on that requires a certain test and learn confidence and a system that allows you to do that. And that leads me quite neatly onto the second point around ethical AI, which I think is more of a poster child for the usage of data. How do you establish a relationship with that data and the person who's created that data such that the privacy and the ethics are maintained? And that's the conversation piece that I wanted to just flow through to. However, before I do that, here in Malaysia, I personally believe we're very much at the sort of tier 1 stage. We are significant investment with the recent budget around infrastructure. Whilst we do have some connectivity, on the far right of the screen, you can see the fact that our connectivity lags some of our neighbors, both geographically, but also comparative countries. We have got some really interesting stepping stones being put in place with the digital economy and the digital ID, and beyond industry forward is the 4IR policy, which are imminent. And then there's the MOSTI 1010 initiative, which again gives us a huge amount of reference points for how do we consider data, how do we manage the policies, the regulations that enable this extraordinary build of infrastructure that we're demanding. But the implications, and I suppose I've seeded in the last 10 minutes a couple of those questions. Knowingly or unknowingly, what am I sharing? Am I willingly doing it? Can I trust whoever is storing and using that particular data set? And how do I relate to that? Do I have to give permission? Do I have the right to have my data set reviewed, adapted, or indeed removed? How does that relationship between citizens, the users of the smart city, and the smart city platform work? And again, this is far from exhaustive, but perhaps it will evoke a series of questions that we'll deal with towards the back end of this conversation. The tangible, which is often cited when we talk about smart cities, that's about the 5G network rollout. That's certainly about the amount of edge computing or fog computing, the open data standards, the infrastructure needed, the leverage of emerging tech as we go through narrowband IoT, or indeed the broadest reference of the word IoT, and apply that into use cases that make sense. I think a lot of that is understood. That definitely represents a significant proportion of the 800 billion that we were talking about as the benefits from smart cities. But the thing I would draw attention to, and I know that we at PwC feel very strongly about the advocacy and the trust agenda, is the implications on the intangibles and the necessary need for us as citizens to encourage all of those developing smart cities, be it government or private sector, to consider and bake in a huge amount of these components into a smart city strategy as we go. I mentioned Josh Statler at Darwin. He makes a massive point of referencing that his smart city strategy is primarily around legislation and enablement and responsibility. So we need that same sense of responsibility being applied in the way that we consider the data side of it, but also, and to the far right of the screen, you'll see the empowering citizens concept. Establishing the basis is part one. Making that innovate and creating the virtuous circle or the ever increasing value that might come from this to develop an opportunity to go from primary use case to factored or referential use cases and indeed inferred use cases. It is fundamental to engage the citizen and to allow for that feedback loop to occur. This is not being done to us as citizens. This is being done for us on our behalves. It is equally our responsibility to allow that voice to be heard. But it's not going to be easy. No journey of this sort of scale ought to be, otherwise we'd be in that nirvana of a smart city already. What I've cited here is just 8 major stumbling blocks. They risk being stumbling blocks, if not considered appropriately. Let me just start with the tech side. So the network city strategy around capacity or coverage, relatively easy. Telecoms companies have been doing that for 25, 30 years across various forms of the G as they build out infrastructure. However, there is the question, the last bullet point there around retrofitting existing infrastructure. That comes at a bit of a hidden cost, which is something that needs to be considered as we go through this. You cannot simply overlay a 5G network. A lot of 5G networks still need to anchor on a 4G network. And if the coverage and capacity of that 4G network is insufficient, or indeed the fiber backhaul from the base station to the core network, that itself requires a serious amount of infrastructure investment. Moving around the clock, data we've talked about, being able to interoperate and having a responsible but open data policy, I think is fundamental to be able to plug in what we need to do. Security, I think, speaks for itself. What if the next virus isn't a biological one? How do we manage that pandemic in a world where we're increasingly connected, particularly to our city? Vendors policy, in my mind, somewhat go together. How we encourage that relationship to plug in to a government initiative is fundamental to all of this. And likewise, resources and talent, they also coexist. This is not just about dollars and cents. This is as much about making sure that the vocational capability around data scientists and the innovation, that curiosity that comes from running a what-if scenario on the data, it is fundamental to being able to find out those relationships that are not ordinary or can't be seen from the surface. And then finally, it's us as citizens. So how do we feel inclusive? These are all questions that we need to ask. What we've generated is effectively a virtuous circle, which might represent a bit of a backdrop or a reference point. So we see the relationship between that innovation and transparency, which you just described. That encourages adoption. That pull factor of citizens wanting to be able to interact and communicate with that smart city environment or that platform is fundamental, because that adoption plus scaled adoption fundamentally drives innovation. And then we're back into the loop. So the opportunity, I mean, I've cited the smart scooter concept at Darwin on the left-hand side with number 6, innovation. But any principle that we apply needs to be scalable or at least extensible. So it needs to be applicable to either an adjacent environment or a sector or a use case, or it needs to be open enough to allow it to be plugged into other environments, other platform providers, and other service providers. What I'll just start with is perhaps a bit of food for the questions that I'll be taking in 2 or so minutes, which for me really talk to the 2 main stakeholders that need to be considered. I think the principle of us as citizens being considered is absolutely hygiene. But if you're in a government environment, and we'll be discussing this on the panel in half an hour or so, how do we manage and measure the benefits? How do we change the regulatory framework? And this is legal legislation that would need to be newly gazetted. It sits in government departments, and it sits at a federal level. How do we manage that to facilitate not just infrastructure deployment, but the intangible side of the deployment, the IP protection, the data rights for me as a data owner or you as a data processor, but equally the privacy considerations that we manage. And this is not, again, just talking security and firewalls. This is as much about how do we manage in the event that the privacy has been violated, what happens? What is the remedy that we apply? How do we ensure equity in the smart cities? There are a myriad of stakeholders that need to be considered across all the segments of society. They need equity, and that needs to be transparently represented in a smart city strategy. You cannot, I agree, boil the ocean, but you do need to start somewhere. There isn't an image of the Great Wall of China with 1,000 steps, but it does start somewhere. It does need to start in a process where perhaps the biggest bang for the buck or the worst is dealt with first. Some moniker that allows you to prioritize where we're going with this. How do we ensure the beneficiaries are actually benefiting? That feedback loop that we talked about in the previous slides really comes into its own when we're talking about how do we measure and how do we represent and how do we justify and how do we substantiate those benefits. But that is only one part of the equation. The private sector really need to think through how do we contract to enable innovation. If we move beyond a tier one conversation where it is a sort of bilateral transaction and we allow for some ambiguity in the contracting, but we also recognize that we will share in the benefits of that ambiguity. How do private sector lean into that opportunity? How do we educate government around financing? How do we balance the risk and reward? PPP schemes are typically the hallmark or the blueprint for how do you manage reward versus risk, and you establish what your risk profile is, and the flip side is the reward profile. What data can be stored and what problem you can address is effectively the flip side of the government agenda. But I would talk to just the middle one. How do we foster engagement as citizens? This isn't about selling your brand or your product into a smart system ecosystem or a smart city platform or an ecosystem. This is about making the very most out of what we can do. So those are some of the questions that we would have thought through might make sense. With 5 minutes left, perhaps there are some questions from you at home, you at work / home that we can deal with as we go as well.
I mean, after listening to all of this, you made a little joke about it not being like 1980, like it's not Orwellian. It seems more like a Brave New World to me, in a sense that every single individual societies have their roles to play. But if it's so like big, right? Oh, I think I'm gonna ask my own question now. But if it's like so big, I mean, as a business owner, right? For example, in the tier one transaction, because as you pointed out, that's where we are, right? Like, where do you start to move towards innovating for smart cities?
You solve the biggest problem first, or the problem that you can solve, and then you scale. Much like any other startup or entrepreneurial environments, your business mission is your business mission, right? If you need to pivot that, then you pivot. But fundamentally, the idea of tagging something onto sustainability or the ESG agenda, I think makes a huge amount of sense at this stage, particularly with net zero being such a heavily talked about concept. Anything that can reduce costs, they're typically 75% of all smart city use cases right now globally all talk to cost reduction. It's less about the improvement to us as consumers and citizens, other than perhaps our taxes being reduced or the government dollar being stretched across more services. But it is fundamentally, I think the first baby steps always relate to cost reduction. And there is so much cost if we think about electricity and lighting, if we think about sanitation and pickup and the government services around that, if we think about the amount of water that is lost through pipes, being able to manage and pinpoint underground where that leak might be and drill once, not drill 15 times to find it, to fix it. Those are all cost-saving opportunities that private sector looks for solutions or partnerships for.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, maybe that could reduce my TNB bill as well over the past few months. I think that's an interesting concept, I guess, in terms of saving cost in terms of like as a business to diagnose all of these different problems using technology. What about like the benefits to society? I mean, obviously we can talk about it conceptually, but personally for you, since we're having a conversation, what is the biggest benefit that you think this would have to the average individual, or what you would like to see?
So maybe I'd classify it into three different tiers, right? There's the benefit that I know that government is starting, and local government, and this is far from a criticism. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's more of an opportunity for us all. That I know that those opportunities are being considered as part of a broader plan, right? That we're not simply putting infrastructure in place for infrastructure's sake. So that would be one. So there's a broad sort of warm, fuzzy feeling that comes from that aspect. Me specifically, and then perhaps the next tier down would be sort of as a household, right? Knowing that we feel quite strongly about recycling and the opportunity that represents to lower our footprint, knowing that is being taken seriously and being considered all the way down the waste value chain, that would consider that sort of household perspective. And then me personally, knowing that there is an opportunity, perhaps even a pull factor for the sort of the youth and those learning about what they need to do around data or what they need to do around technology, that there is a pathway for them to move into new business. We heard from Jacob about the half-life of an S&P company, the S&P 500, getting down to sort of 13 years, I seem to recall. That actually, for me, represents an opportunity for small to medium-sized businesses to just expand with such scale and velocity. They need talent. That talent comes from knowing that there is some consistency in the way that we're going to apply those sort of pathways of development, be it technology or be it digitization or be it data related, to allow that then the university gets involved, then there's scale at the university, then the schools start placing some sort of baseline STEM around how to move those opportunities forward.
Thank you. I like that answer because I'm a young person who is very passionate. We have a few more questions for you. We have two questions for you, actually. So could we pull up the first one? Okay, Hao-Yin asks, what do you think is the biggest challenge for Malaysia to evolve as a smart city in the near future? Any suggestions or opinions to the upcoming generation as an early preparation for digitization in the future? You're just talking about this. Can you expand?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways of, I suppose, framing that particular question, but I'm going to frame it in a data context. I think one of the biggest challenges for Malaysia is to move away from perhaps the stovepipes of those who own and look after the data and create more of a collaborative exchange where we can all responsibly, but in an open way, encourage and engage with that data set. There are so many examples of that, and frankly, you need to look no further south than Singapore to see how they're pivoting effectively what was their currency of port and shipping and trade into positioning themselves as a sort of data exchange hub for the region. How we get to play in that as Malaysia, it is super important. How our small to medium-sized businesses get to export, how they clear customs, how they manage the tax relationship, be it SST or a version of GST or whatever might be coming in the future. How that process works requires customs and excise and immigration and all the government-related departments, on the one hand, to be engaging on that data conversation, and on the other hand, the private sector to be taking that responsibility. So if there was one word, it would be data. And I think fundamentally getting more across the data science, the data engineer, the architecture, the opportunities, the AI, that future track for an upcoming generation is fundamental. It might all feel like maths, but I don't think it is. I think the maths powers the back end. It's the logic and the creativity that comes from sort of intrinsic curiosity to say, what if? That allows us to do that. The interaction points and platforms that you can use to manipulate and configure and sort of work flow data nowadays is so engaging and second nature that it's a sort of drag and drop equivalent. So that the science is less about it nowadays.
I like that. It's basically dream what you want and then see how it's possible. All right, that's cool. We have another question as well. I think this is our last question. This is from Mindy. Many countries, Malaysia included, still have ways to go in terms of connectivity. Some areas in certain states still lack access to basic needs like clean water or roads. Would smart cities actually bridge the gap between urban and rural areas, or will smart cities drive a wider gap between these two areas?
That's a fascinating question. And it, in principle, Mindy, it should reduce the gap. Why? Because the city's responsibility to us as citizens isn't simply about reducing costs and making money. It is as much about that societal responsibility that they have to bridge that gap. And look, frankly, no further when we're talking about the infrastructure. And let me just talk briefly about connectivity. That USB fund that MCMC looks after, and then Jandala that has come out the back of that, will do an extraordinary sort of step change to the infrastructure opportunity that we have in this country. And that's just from the connectivity perspective. Whether or not that leads to cleaner water and more accessible roads, in countries with the landmass or territories with the landmass of sort of Sabah, Sarawak, but the population size much smaller, do they really can government fundamentally justify? Yes, of course they can, because it's a basic human right, right? So you look at legislation in quite a few parts of, you could call it the developed world, although going through Brexit, I'm not sure the UK is that developed nowadays anymore. But the basic human right there is broadband, right? So any developer for the last 20 years has had to enable access to broadband within the building. So we're not sitting there with various Wi-Fi routers trying to optimize where we sit so that we can get the best signal. That is now a fundamental right, as is, a fire escape or a lift shelter. That same fundamental principle needs to abide as we seek to bridge that gap, not least from a connectivity perspective, from a services perspective, putting the data into the hands of the individuals in whatever, urban or suburban or kampong area. It is fundamental for all sorts of things, from trades to relationships to access to interactions.
Thank you, Michael. I think that's our last question. Do you want to say any last parting words before you go?
Only to say that we'll be sitting on a panel with quite a variety of individuals as we go through the next 30 minutes or so, and I just hope that we'll get all of those perspectives coming out.
Well, I know I'm excited for the panel, so see you soon. I'll change positions and then continue on with the rest of the emceeing and hosting. See you. Hello, I'm back on the other side. Thank you so much, Mike. It was such a great honor to hear big ideas and big concepts together. Ladies and gentlemen, the World Economic Forum says that by 2050, almost 70% of the world's population will live in smart cities. Our next speaker is inviting all of us to actively engage and discuss on what we need to do to realize the vision of Malaysia's smart city framework. But to understand smart cities is to secure smart cities. Ladies and gentlemen, here is David Raju, Palo Alto's Systems Engineering Head of Cybersecurity Engineering for Malaysia.
Session. My name Thank you so much for coming for this keynote session. My name is David Raju. I'm currently the country SE head for Palo Alto Networks Malaysia. You know, I've been in cybersecurity for the past 15 years, and every day has been an exciting journey. And you know, what's most interesting is, you know, together with my team and I, we wake up every day, right, trying to figure out in terms of solving some of cybersecurity's hardest challenges. And securing Malaysia's smart city is no different from that, right? Or as I would like to call it, how not to set Malaysia's smart city on fire. So let's get into the discussion itself, right? So firstly, I think when I was kind of researching about smart cities, what really was interesting about it was that there was no real official definition of smart cities, right? It's only coming from academia in terms of what smart city is. So these are all, it came up as early as even 1999, trying to define what smart cities are like. But thankfully, right, for Malaysia, we have a smart city. So this is actually shown, and you can actually get this from the Malaysian Smart City Framework. And here's a quick definition of it, right? Cities that uses ICT and technological advancement to address urban issues, including improving our quality of life, promote economic growth, develop sustainable and safe environment, and of course, encourage efficient urban management practices. So that's actually what's mentioned in the KPKT's website around the Malaysian Smart City framework itself in 2018. So a deeper dive in terms of what that looks like. And if you look at the Malaysia Smart City, it consists of basically 7 components in it, cutting across 16 cross-cutting policies with 36 strategies around it, and then all coming around with indicators in terms of how we're actually measuring the impact of a smart city implementation. And this gives you a view in terms of, again, that 7 smart city components. And you can see definitely one of them is smart digital infrastructure. And then it talks about enhancing enhanced personal data protection and cybersecurity measures, right? Smart cities, the components has got a lot of topics, a lot of components to it, and it's a session I am looking forward to have with my panelists around this, particularly around cybersecurity, right? And if you look at the framework itself, policy number 5, right? Cybersecurity shall be strengthened in a smart city context, Malaysia Smart City Framework 2018. So that's well and good. Thankfully, our government the ministry has looked into what a Malaysian smart city would look like, and putting into context what are all the components that's relevant to Malaysia itself, right? Now, if I flip the view a little bit to a global perspective, now if I zoom out from a national or country perspective from Malaysia, I zoom it out to an example of using World Economic Forum. Now, I apologize if this is a bit hard for you to see, but what you can do is you can go on into the World Economic Forum and look at this interesting visualization, right? They have this around this digital transformations of city and urbanization. And all the topics that are related to cities and urbanizations, the challenges, the benefits are out of it, right? And one of the components out of that from WEF's perspective is urban resilience. And the visualization then further breaks it down into, of course, the components around cybersecurity, right? And what are the challenges that we are looking at from a cybersecurity perspective when it comes to implementing smart cities. So here, and this is where I like to kind of change the conversation a little bit, right? Our panel and I, we're going to talk about all the benefits around smart city, but I want to take this opportunity to look at smart cities, right? And our world is changing for all obvious reasons that you and I are currently facing and experiencing right now. But from a cybersecurity perspective, I wanted to kind of draw your attention to really 3 things around smart cities and what those challenges are, right? Namely around IoT, around cloud transformation, and how 5G has a big impact in terms of implementing smart cities and making sure smart cities are successful in that sense. So I like to draw upon all these reports from our own Palo Alto Networks Unit 42, the various threat reports that we've released in 2020, and give you a sense in terms of what are the challenges and what are the cybersecurity issues, right, to look at from when it comes to smart city. The framework itself, the paper itself, has its view in terms of where cybersecurity looks at, but I would like to kind of add on and perhaps take this opportunity to enhance that particular framework with some of the data points that we are getting from this report itself. So 3 things I'm going to talk about. The first one really is around Internet of Things, right? Now, if you look at any smart city research, even our very own one and the global ones, IoT underpins a lot of that capability to mature from a city, a traditional analog city, to a smart city, right? And you can see here, right, some of the data points around here. 1.1 trillion market. It's a 1.1 trillion market by 2026. 41.6 billion connected devices by 2025. Now, just to give you a bit of context around that, by 2025, we are expecting the human population to be at about 8 billion. So if you think about it, 8 billion compared to 41.6 billion of connected devices by 2025, that is about what, one human person to about 8 devices, right? But if you think about it, you and I probably have got a lot more connected devices, in currently at present. So I think this number will definitely need to revisit it, right? But nonetheless, right? And when you look at budgets and all that, today itself, a lot of decision makers that we are in conversation with some of the largest organizations here in Malaysia, that they are looking at IoT and they have budgets to implement IoT projects. Now, if you flip that around to, I guess, the other side of the coin, if you think about IoT, this is taken directly out from our Unit 42 IoT Threat Report, right, in 2020. 98%, almost all the IoT devices that we've seen on our report are unencrypted. That means traffic is going in the clear. Anyone snooping on the traffic, looking onto the network itself, will be able to see what the traffic is all about. Now, what's more scary, of course, is, or what's more concerning, is that the number of attacks, a large amount of attacks, are very common, and they exist on these IoT devices. And almost half, or a little bit more than half, right? 57% of all IoT devices that we've seen in the report are highly vulnerable. Now, if I break that down a little bit more, you can see again, right, the same 41% is more technical in nature in terms of how we basically compromise the IoT device in a smart city implementation, right? But a good percentage, 26% of it comes down to just user practices, weak user default password configurations on those IoT devices, or the traditional social engineering attack falling to a phishing attack, right, on the user's end itself. That those, if you take them together, takes up almost 3/4 of the attacks that we are seeing on IoT devices. So this is really important to kind of drive home the point, to make sure that IoT, when you look again, when I say IoT, when you look at smart city implementations, it's going to be critical component in that, right? And making sure that these IoT devices are secure from day one, when they get implemented, and figuring out a way to also keep it secure once it's out in the real world, is a important part of having a stable and secure smart city infrastructure itself. Now, so that's on the IoT side of things. Now, when the other big part of this is around with cloud, right? Given this pandemic, we've had conversations with CIOs, CISOs to say that how cloud has made them the digital rock stars of their organizations. That's because for those companies that has been able to very quickly pivot to digital, they've been seen as the rock stars, right? While COVID was the digital chief transformation officer, it also made the CISO, again, right, digital rock stars. But I think with that, there is a lot of security challenges that comes along with this whole big rush to cloud. Now, why cloud, right? And it ties very closely to IoT, because the amount of data and telemetry that IoT devices are generating, you need a system that is able to scale, that's elastic, that is highly resilient in nature, to be able to now consume that amount of telemetry coming into the environment. And the cloud platform gives you all that. But what we've seen with that is that, a lot of insecure configurations, and we've seen in the past already major breaches that has happened in the cloud particularly, is not because of some technical vulnerability. It was because the user has misconfigured a particular configuration on the cloud provider, cloud platform itself, right? So things like insecure configurations, host vulnerabilities, when the software that's being developed for the cloud was not developed securely and it's been pushed out to the cloud, That's where a lot of that security challenges or vulnerabilities are now getting baked in right at the coding lifecycle itself, right? So that's the second part of where we see some challenges around smart cities, right? IoT is one, and then this whole moving to cloud is another one as well. So now, then when you put this on top, and you're probably wondering where 5G comes in, and if you read, the Malaysian smart city framework as well, no different, right? They actually very specifically mentioned that 5G was a big driver to realize a lot of the capabilities or implementations around smart cities. What's interesting about 4G, this whole shift from 4G to 5G, I've learned is that the shift is going to be away from the consumer, that means you and I. Think about it, right? 4G is very targeted towards the consumer, you and I, having just literally fast access to the internet. But when 5G happens, it's going to be very industry specific. The use case is not going to be you and I as the consumer. The use case is going to be the industries that will be using 5G as its capabilities to roll out, IoT devices that's running over a 5G network that has got ultra low low latency, right? You want to use that in utility or in fleet management. Can you imagine in healthcare having IoT devices in there, or even in energy? Your smart meters will potentially be even running over a 5G network, possibly, right? To be able to figure out what's happening, how much electricity you're consuming, or even down to water management that uses 5G to kind of have IoT sensors, kind of remote sense its environment. So 5G will drive this future of Industry 4.0. Now, what will happen is that IoT and cloud, it already has got a lot of that security functionalities in there. Now imagine you put IoT now on top of 5G, all right? What that means is that billions of IoT now suddenly has got 5G speeds, means your attack surface now suddenly and became wider by leaps and bounds. Again, right, the same 41.6 billion devices are estimated to be connected. Now, some of the issues around this with 5G security concerns when it comes to IoT will be things like we've seen crypto mining capabilities, right? So now that you've got small little compute capability on IoT devices, now imagine a hacker being able to take over an IoT device and run crypto mining capabilities. That has huge impact on your IoT devices, right? Because the performance of the device, from its battery to CPU utilization, will be severely impacted, because all these are very processor intensive when you're running crypto mining capabilities on an IoT device. Can you imagine that, right? Or ransomware running amok on IoT devices, or as we've seen in the previous attacks on IoT, in the Mirai botnet attack, was that CCTVs around the world was kind of taken over, and they basically distributed denial of service, or a DDoS, against very popular streaming sites itself that took down a large percentage of the internet. So 5G is just going to make that speed a whole lot faster around when it comes to IoT. Now, cloud is another thing, right? End-to-end standalone cloud. So think about 5G not only from what you and I know from a traditional mobile operator, but 5G today potentially can even be run standalone, right, without a mobile operator. And a lot of these technologies, 5G technologies, will run cloud native. So things like containers, serverless technologies, and all that will need to be able to run on that. So the challenge and the report that I've mentioned about cloud, definitely plays into 5G security concerns here. And of course, around new 5G services, right? When you're thinking about 5G services, it's again not about you and I as a consumer, but really industrial vertical demands. And you can see here, right? From fixed broadband to healthcare to energy to connected cars, they all have got very, very different security requirements. Of course, right, you have the differentiated services from a 5G perspective, from a connected car to energy to healthcare. They all have different unique value propositions. So must security come in, right? security needs to be seen as a differentiator to be able to secure all these different 5G services across this different vertical industry applications that's going to sit on 5G services, right? And to be able to now embed security in is going to be not only a differentiator, but really critical to any successful smart city implementation itself. Now, all the doom and gloom, all the scary stuff around security, but those are the realities, right? Those are realities that we're already seeing today, as seen from our threat report. But what are we doing about it, right? So really to be able to now be confident in terms of smart city implementation. One of the biggest things that leaders, when thinking about smart cities, and I urge, and this is a discussion I love to have, is to think about visibility, right? You can't protect what you can't see, literally. So having that visibility across a complex, not even security architecture, right? A complex smart city digital infrastructure, where does security fit in, and that having that visibility from a security point of view is going to be very critical. Now, because of the scale of smart city, because of all the IoT devices that's coming in, all the sensors that's coming in, intelligence with automation is going to be critical here, right? The ability to now always have constant feedback loops to make sure that we are saving times and embedding security as early as possible in the development life cycle, right? So think about it as security as no longer going to be something that's bolted on after the fact, right? I said I've been in security for 15 years. I think traditionally that has always been the mentality that I developed the application, then only think about security. But we're given in today's world with 5G, with smart city, with the way technology is even implemented and developed, you need to have security built right from the start itself. And that's where intelligence comes in, and the ability to now have that feedback loop to be able to stop the attacks, right? And last but not least is simplicity and flexibility. I've been in this industry long enough to see how it has now shifted. Security used to be something organizations think about, that I just need to secure my network around my organization and that's it, right? But as you and I know very well, that today's environment runs all over the place, right? Across all enterprises, cloud, and even hybrid environments. So being able to re-look at your security architecture and reimagine how that security architecture looks like. For a start, rethinking in terms of how security products are actually deployed in your organization today. We've seen as much as organizations having 25 different security products deployed today. That's unheard of, right? You've never heard of 25 different CRM systems deployed in an organization today. But security, that's the case, right? It's and I've been talking to a lot of leaders, is that we see a big stack of security, all trying to fix a particular point problem in security, and that's where all the complexity really comes in as well. So again, the main point around security is that, in the past, security has been reactive. We need to really change that game, especially with smart cities. We need to be able to stay ahead of the threats rather than just reacting to security itself. And last but not least, right, when it comes to smart security, with smart cities, we want to look at it from this perspective, right? From how are we securing users, the citizens, interacting with the application of that smart city, that they are exchanging their data on the network that the smart city is providing across the IoT devices that is sensing or interacting with its environment, right? So to be able to kind of secure all that, across, and give context across any time of the day, across any location, doesn't matter if it's on premise, on your smarts, the street lights, or all the way up to the cloud itself. So in summary, I think we really need to ensure that we do not set fire to Malaysia's smart city, right? And I look forward to a lively discussion and learning with my fellow panelists and the audience itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. It was indeed a very insightful presentation. Without further ado, to wrap up the Smart City track, we are joined with a great panel lineup of industry-leading smart city and digital government practitioners. We have with us Najib Ibrahim, the Managing Director of Cyberview, which is mandated by the Malaysian government in spearheading the development of Cyberjaya to a global tech hub. Our next guest panelist is a Principal Assistant Director at the Digital Government Division of the Malaysian Administrative Modernisation and Management Planning Unit, MAMPU. She is Dr. Rosida Raza. Dialing in all the way from Brisbane, Australia is our special guest from the Smart City Council of Australia, New Zealand, Mr. Adam Beck. And rejoining the panel is Mr. David Raju from Palo Alto Networks Malaysia and Mike Graham of PWC Malaysia, who will be moderating the panel discussion this time. Well, this is definitely a great public and private and country-to-country collaboration at its finest. Before we continue, the panel is going to get ready, so please stay tuned. We will be back in just a short while.
So good morning. And to wrap up the Smart City track, as Mira suggested, we were represented with a series of panelists, all with a view of talking about articulating the future, which plays to the whole Smart City conversation. It plays to the security conversation. It plays to the policymaker conversation. But before we go into anything, what I would like to do is just link the conversation. I think the question that Mindy asked during the presentation I gave a half an hour ago or so was the risk, perhaps, if I use my own words to describe her question. And Adam, I'll start with this. I'll particularly start with you on this one. Is there a risk that the smart city agenda widens the gap between urban and non-urban areas? And what is it people can do to perhaps bridge that gap?
Mike, thanks for that question. I believe it's a really important one, and one that has certainly been stress tested in 2020, particularly as a result of the COVID health pandemic. I think there is certainly a real risk that the Smart Cities agenda does become not only a polarizing agenda, but one that is not for all, regardless of geography and socioeconomic status. If we don't be more diligent in tying it back to outcomes and priorities. There are certainly perceptions that it is a big city, metro city agenda that is full of technology deployments and the use of data platforms that are very costly. That is often the perception that comes with the Smart Cities agenda. What I will say, however, and what does hearten me, is that year on year, we are finding examples and case studies and use cases whereby technology and data is helping build prosperity for our most vulnerable. And I think that that's when we're getting to a place where this is an agenda that is certainly outcomes driven. And if we're not creating change and adding value and creating impact for our most vulnerable, regardless of geography, urban, rural, regional, I don't think it's an agenda that is going to last. So I am cautiously optimistic, and we are seeing more and more signs of where technology and data is playing a role in delivering value, not just in big cities, but also in rural and regional areas as well, and indeed with some of our most vulnerable communities in the population.
Yeah, I think the word vulnerable really resonates with me. Thank you, Adam. And David, just fresh off the back of your presentation, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you.
We talked in advance of this particular panel session about the vulnerable in terms of security.
Yeah.
Is there a risk in that sort of divide concept that actually those that are not looked after become increasingly exposed?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, right? I mean, smart city, I think it's an amazing opportunity to really think about, I guess, narrowing that digital divide, right? And making sure that we are including those populations or those communities that are now, increasingly going to be accessing the net. And I think it almost becomes a responsibility for the city or even an infrastructure provider to make sure that security is literally baked into the service itself, right? And it's because the community, the vulnerable community coming online, getting access to technologies and services, they will be excited in getting onto this, right? And at time and time we've seen again that the bad actors will very well take advantage of this and now try to figure out what's the best way to kind of take advantage of these citizens or this set of users that's coming online, right? So I think it almost becomes, it is actually our responsibility to make sure that smart city has got the security piece of it that's built in. And I hate to say it, right? Not as a bolt-on after effect, which we have seen, and I've seen it in the past decade, that security has always been a bolt-on afterthought kind of thing. So building security, and not only from a technology perspective, probably other panelists will talk about it, from a policy perspective, from a process perspective as well, it's going to be critical to make sure that we have a thriving smart city.
So, with CyberView, Ibrahim, the Petri dish, perhaps, that combines Adam's point about looking after the vulnerable, that really thinks through David's point around, an afterthought of security. How do you, perhaps just give us a couple of sentences on CyberView, the mission, what you're planning, and how you might respond to some of those challenges.
All right, thank you, Michael. So by the way, I'm Najib from Cyberview Sdn Bhd. We are the master developer of Cyberjaya. So our approach with regards to smart city implementation strategy actually involve a three-pronged approach. First and foremost is that we prioritizing inclusivity, also being citizen-centric. Secondly, enabling and digitalizing all services. Last but not least, that ensuring that our smart city is open and collaborative. So this is basically what we implemented in Cyberjaya. And this strategies includes executable programs that we implemented throughout Cyberjaya. And these programs actually drive technology innovation in Cyberjaya and truly make our city as a living lab for our homegrown technology. And our current smart city framework is designed to be holistic enough, including the following components, pretty much in the form of smart infrastructure, smart economy, smart environment, and also smart social. While rolling out the smart city solution in these priority areas, we do need to collaborate with other other agencies, and be able to empower and participate citizens, business, and other stakeholders in shaping of the future. So basically, when we talk about smart city, what we are doing currently is that for Cyberjaya to be a living lab, we test all what do you call it, cases, pain points, so that it can be implemented throughout the city. So this is our approach when it comes to smart city. It's actually one of the two pillars that we're focusing on, is that smart city and also our living lab program.
The living lab speaks to me a lot. I like what that does optically in my head when we think about that sort of opportunity to test and learn and scale. You mentioned citizen centricity, and Dr. Rashida, I'm genuinely intrigued as to how we can encourage, and in your role as Mampu, how do we encourage Malaysians, the rakyat, to contribute and to engage in that conversation more so?
Okay, thank you, Michael. Actually, in developing a smart city, we indirectly creating a smart community where the government extensively use the technology to interact with the government. In order to deliver the extensive value, the services provided by the government is not based only the latest technology available. However, it's based on the rakyat needs, the citizen need. This is a citizen-centric services. Thus, we need a citizen engagement or participation, which is a two-way communication to get the rakyat points of view and also their pain points toward the decision making later on. Actually, government has started off the engagement process by providing a platform, e-participation platform for the rakyat to contribute ideas as well as give feedback on the digital government.
Fabulous. I think the concept of creating that sort of virtuous circle between innovation, regulation, and then activation, the testing and the learning cycle. Adam, it strikes me, and I sort of stalked you on LinkedIn way before this conversation just to see just the amount of time that you'd contributed to communities and sustainability and most latterly the sort of last 10 years or so on government agendas. Can you talk us through a little bit on the regulatory frameworks that you've seen, not just in your backyard, but that really enable that sort of technology adoption?
Absolutely. I think as we have been able to confirm and identify those key barriers, Michael, to smart cities success, we've been able to learn and fold that into policy and other regulatory frameworks that that aspire to accelerate deployment. Because even though the technology exists, technology's never been the barrier. It's typically other horizontal issues, whether it might be procurement, funding and financing. We still see a lot of behaviors and mindsets internally within organizations that present a barrier to sort of scaling and replication of solutions. So I think we're at a point as a global smart cities community and movement where the barriers are very well known, and we're starting to see that play out in new and emerging policy. Just in our backyard here in Australia, in New South Wales, a new smart infrastructure policy has been released by the New South Wales state government, and that sees every infrastructure project in the state, which is funded by government, over $10 million, requiring a minimum level of technology and data solution embedment into whether it's buildings, libraries, roads, rail, bridges, or tunnels. So you see, globally leading policy like that, not only going quite a substantial way in accelerating solution deployment, but what you see there, which is potentially even more exciting, is the opportunity to catalyze a marketplace, really grow an ecosystem. And when you've got an infrastructure pipeline of about 300 billion Australian dollars for the New South Wales government, you can see that for the next 5 to 10 years, that state is, and that government is going to really have some great foundations to enable smart solution deployment, learn and continue to evolve their policy. So we're starting to see some very exciting policy and regulatory frameworks starting to emerge. And I could point to many regions around the world. I was in India, Bangalore, late last year. I met with about 75 cities there. We're seeing some fantastic policy emerge, likewise throughout Europe and other great leading regions of the world. So it took some time, but we're starting to see some good policy and regulation now responding to our key barriers.
And I presume Najib, your budget isn't quite the same as what Adam just described New South Wales's budget is. But from a policy setting perspective, is there things that you are looking for to make sure specifically that the benefits on any particular effort that you might be investing time into from an infrastructure or a use case solution, how do we capture those benefits? How do we make sure that we're shouting from the rooftops that we've done what we said we wanted to do and we've exceeded our targets?
Okay, well, basically, when we talk about development of Cyberjaya, it's always about collaboration. So currently, CyberView, we are collaborating with parties, be it government agencies or be it the private sectors, to be able to roll out some of the initiatives here in Cyberjaya. For instance, recently we have rolled out these to recognize one of the three clusters in Cyberjaya, namely smart healthcare, smart mobility, and digital creative. And all these clusters is actually located in south of Cyberjaya. If you've been to Cyberjaya, you'll basically there's four distinctive zones in Cyberjaya. North part of Cyberjaya, where we have all these commercials and thriving commercial community there. We have South Cyberjaya, we have all this innovation district. West Cyberjaya, we have all these what you call universities and colleges and whatnot. And not to mention about our downtown, where we have this thriving commerce district. So coming back to your question, Michael, for instance, we have, in terms of infrastructure, we have rolled out what we call this our 5G Open Lab. Okay, thus far, with our 5G Open Lab, we are currently collaborating one of the telcos here in Malaysia. So we use a mid-range spectrum, trying to enable application of test cases. At the moment, we have around 23 use cases at our 5G Open Lab. And this is where we try and to roll out how we can use 5G technology to be able to enhance the penetration of technology in our daily life. Yeah. So this is one, is our collaboration with the private sector. We are also working closely with the city council in here in Sepang. We have identified what we call this route for autonomous vehicle as well. But nonetheless, some of this new technology, when we implement or when to roll out this technology, we need to have what we call a regulatory, how to get it to pass through the regulation. You can't run an autonomous vehicle on the road, on the public road, without getting necessary permits and things like that. So in Cyberjaya, also we have what we call this NRS, National Regulatory Sandbox, run by our subsidiary called Futurize. So by having this, we can use a lot of this new technology, for instance, like drone, autonomous vehicles, and whatnot, and we'll be able to roll it out throughout the city. So that's why we focusing Cyberjaya as a living test, is as a living lab, whereby a lot of people from far and wide, they can come in and test their use cases here in Cyberjaya. So they will be able to, for one, is that let's test it out. It's just a new technology, let's test it out in Cyberjaya. And then from Cyberjaya, it can be a catalyst where we can roll it out to nationwide. So this is where we are looking for in Cyberjaya.
And I mean, just to I suppose go back to the question as well. Do you put yourself under the pressure to genuinely represent the benefits, and is equally important an opportunity, to your point around the living lab and the testing and the opportunities that you present for players? Is that mostly the benefit that you're striving towards, that opportunity, as opposed to dollars and cents that people might start measuring you against in the short term?
Okay. So it's all about getting the community to support new technology. 2 years back already, almost 3 years back, we roll out what we call this fintech using cashless. We basically promote use of cashless community here in Cyberjaya. So when we roll out this, we work with some of the banks and financial institutions at first it's quite difficult for people to get to this. But then again, once we roll it out citywide and people find the benefit of using technology. So basically our role here is actually to promote usage of technology. It can be used throughout the at least the city of Cyberjaya, but also we want it to be, to be again used throughout the country. So as far as Cyberjaya is concerned, we want to be the catalyst, the capital of creation when it comes to technology. We invite a lot of R&D companies, we invite a lot of investors, let's come and invest in Cyberjaya, and use Cyberjaya as your test bed and hub before you roll out throughout the country. So this is how we look at how we can benefit from this initiative.
No, a lot of that resonates with me, right? Just having the opportunity to test, as you say, and learn is fundamental. And I suppose some of those learnings might relate to, perhaps, David, the sort of unintended consequences, right? So, we also, as leaders, need to be prepared to consider the effect on security or indeed the data that gets thrown off in this particular environment. How do you, David, from a technology and from perhaps even your views on the sort of regulatory side, how do we mitigate against those unintended consequences?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at Malaysia, and I think as everyone in the call kind of knows, we just recently launched the Malaysian Cybersecurity Strategy Framework, right? I think that's one step in the right direction to looking at all things national from a cybersecurity perspective. I think from where Cyberview is and their role in terms of testing, and I think there's a lot of learnings that we can do there, right? And I kind of alluded to an earlier, what I talked about was that security. I think we need to make sure that even when we're testing it, how do we actually embed security into a lot of these new services within a smart city context? Because I think there's a lot of excitement and hype around making sure that the products work and all that without thinking about security. And then at the point when you kind of slot it in, the application suddenly starts, kind of not work as expected because we never really thought about it. That's one end of the aspect of it to your question, right? I think the other part of it as leaders really is to think about, as a lot of these technologies in smart city goes into production, how do we now think about in terms of having a incident response plan around it, right? Because bad things are going to happen. It's not an if, it's just when it's going to happen. Does the city even have the ability to recover itself quickly, right? I think we all have kind of personally experienced how the whole water situation affected us. And that was in the real world. I mean, imagine that in a cyber world, in a smart city, has got very real consequences and implications to our lives from a smart city perspective.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I, we lack in this 2D virtual world. I suppose we somewhat lack those sort of social cues. But I did notice both Najib and Adam, you were both nodding around that security topic. So I'll come to you, Adam, first, but I'll go to you as well, Najib, after this. Have you gone through, particularly in your sphere of influence, that sort of security hiccup? And is there any, lightning bolts of insight that you can share with us?
Well, in terms of incidents, I think, and that's the thing with security, right? In the past, it has always been a knee-jerk reaction. So the whole industry is kind of littered with all these stories that you keep hearing about. And that's the interesting thing about security, right? Every single day, I've been doing this 15 years now, and it's always something new with it. I think the light bulb that I'm seeing slowly happen around this is one, how really intertwined our digital lives and our physical lives are, right? Down to even this concept of and if you want to read about it, it's called digital twins, right? How intertwined our lives are around this, and I think the light bulb moment is kind of coming to almost every conversation out there. You need to secure it, you need to have it, but how do we kind of go about it, reimagining it? And I'm slowly starting to see the fact that we are not taking security and doing like a point product technology and putting a band-aid patch over it, but really kind of taking this opportunity to think about it holistically from a platform approach, because without that's not going to work. So hopefully that light bulb is coming on.
No, and that resonates. Adam, have you got insights from across the ocean, as it were?
You know, Michael, we've had some pretty significant cyber attacks nationally over the past 12, 18 months that have been sort of very public in that they've been announced and disclosed by relevant institutions. You know, our Prime Minister has even come out and announced that our nation has, you know, succumbed to breaches, you know, with critical infrastructure. So what's interesting to see is cyber and the threat of attacks has started to become a little bit more of a public topic. And that's a strategic move to raise awareness within the community. What is interesting is this sort of dilemma that we have. You know, we talk about data is the new oil. I mean, data is the most abundant resource on earth right now. Yet it's the least used in terms of value being created. So I ask myself the question all the time: where are we going to be at with cyber when we actually work out how to use data and extract value from it? And whilst we may be opening data at the moment and doing some data sharing, we're not going to fully realize or monetize data until we get sort of data exchange practices happening where we start creating marketplaces and we actually do value data. So we are, I believe, year on year in this part of the world, in Australia and New Zealand, being exposed publicly more to more dialogue and discussion. This year, our Department of Home Affairs released what I think is an excellent national cyber strategy, and indeed the funding that the Australian government and particularly the New South Wales state government is putting behind cyber. The amounts of money is eye-watering. The New South Wales state government is seeking to be a global leader in cyber, if not the cyber leader in the Southern Hemisphere. So Australia is going all out on cyber and building up policy, regulatory frameworks, and of course resourcing behind all of that to make sure that you know we sort of, you know, secure our data and our critical infrastructure in a way that positions us for, you know, greater prosperity and productivity going forward.
And David, just back to you, is that obviously resonates heavily, right? I mean, just the ambition that Adam talked about is, you know, the word eye-watering evokes enough imagery for us to consider. Is there enough being done in your minds? Obviously, you need to tread a fine line here, but is there enough being done here to, and perhaps what is the call to action on that cyber topic for you?
I think firstly, just simply with the fact that we renewed and I think reimagined in terms of our Malaysian cybersecurity strategy, that's I feel in a step in that right direction, right? To kind of give all of us, you know, here in Malaysia, that vision in terms of where we want to go. And of course, the backing of it in terms of implementing some of the strategies that has been mentioned around that. And I think in part, one of the things we've done with that is to make sure that, you know, the talent ecosystem, we're fully engaged in that, right? Recently on the MDEC event, we signed a virtual MOU for training new cybersecurity talent in that sense. So in terms of more can be done, I think when it comes to security, with just the sheer pace of change with technology, we need to keep up with it, and that's where security really is, to make sure that's embedded in there. It's never a day's end of work, right? It's always running, it's always churning in that sense. So, but the fact that we've got that strategy in place, we've got a target, and that constant dialogue and discussion with government and stakeholders is going to be critical in this sense. Yeah.
So, thank you, David. And Najib, just to round off the security topic, because I do want us to move on to data and the services that represents. But Najib, how are you dealing with, what was effectively a warning from Adam and his descriptions around what's happened to New South Wales government and the Prime Minister of Australia, and perhaps, to David's point, saying, yes, we're at a starting place, but we're moving forward. Are you finding yourself having to be ahead of it, even policy in this country, just to make sure that you're secure at CyberView?
Okay. Actually, I have to qualify myself because actually, we are not cyber security specialists in this form. But what I can share with you, basically, Michael, is that in Cyberjaya, we have the cybersecurity agencies, government agencies currently housed in Cyberjaya. So as far as cybersecurity aspects concerned, we are working closely with those agencies to come out with the hub for cybersecurity in Malaysia. So we're trying to bring like-minded people, companies, investors to come and open shops in Cyberjaya and to make it a hub to centralize all these cybersecurity issues, to attend to all cybersecurity issues. So we are working closely with them, but with regards to what our involvement in coming up with the policies and whatnot, basically we actually in collaboration with Cybersecurity Initiative to come up with those policies and how we attend to those threats. And amazingly, during our conversation with them, because I believe David mentioned a bit about talent, during my engagement with Cybersecurity Initiative, they mentioned that basically we do have the talent in Malaysia. You need to basically bring people from outside the country to be able to look into this. It's just a matter of for us to find the right method or methodology and how to address this threat. Because the threat of cybersecurity is actually globally, it's not just in Malaysia, but also it's actually something of concern for us globally.
No, I understand. And you're right? It doesn't matter who your neighbor is physically. It matters who your neighbor is sort of logically, as it were, and what their intent is and everything that might happen as a result of that. But let's just change topics away from cyber, because not at all trying to bring it down to anything other than the articulation of that future, right? The title of the panel. And it'll lead us into the date topic, I'm sure. But Dr. Rasida, how do we ensure that everyone, urban, rural, etc., get access to the sort of digital initiatives, the smart city initiatives, so that we can throw off the data?
Well, for me, a smart city basically is a city that capable to deliver information and services online. The communication infrastructure, name it wireless or wired, must be fully ready to address this urban challenge. With referring to the one study done by the Ministry of Communication and Multimedia on the gap analysis of communication infrastructure and readiness for the smart city implementation, actually we government is still striving to bridge the digital gap for the urban and rural areas. And the communication infrastructure is expected to be ready by the year 2022. And another challenge for me is part of infrastructure readiness is also performance. The performance of the communication infrastructure. And as a strategic intervention, actually government has set up strategic intervention for to reduce the digital gap. Actually, government has set up and expand such initiatives such as develop a Wi-Fi community, internet center. We also have a pusat internet desa, and recently with the collaborative with the private sector, we have a national digital infrastructure plan, or we call it Jendela.
So that'll do a huge amount to establishing connectivity and infrastructure services. And I suppose the question, and Adam, you raised this earlier around data. I'd like to explore that a little bit more, because it's such a nebulous concept. How do you're standing on your pulpit, how do you describe how people might think about data in a smart city environment?
Michael, the smart city, as we've been referring to it for 8 years at the Smart Cities Council, is one that uses technology and data to accelerate sustainability and livability outcomes. Those two elements, technology and data, have always been key, and one without the other sort of doesn't work. I think there has been a focus on technology over the past 5 to 10 years, and I think, if anything, 2020 is the real watershed moment where, particularly given the global recession and health pandemic, that the value of data really started to become a sort of realization for many cities and other organizations. Having the availability of those insights when we most needed them, when our communities and businesses were shutting down, having access to insights was critical. And for those that didn't have a data program or didn't invest in data, we saw that they were ones that were really heavily hit. So I think we're going to sort of go into 2021 with a greater appreciation for data, and that we will invest more in data, because data is intelligence and insights on what's going on. And for those that didn't have access to good, relevant data this year, it was very difficult to make the decisions quickly that we needed to help our communities rebound and recover. So I think the health pandemic alone has been a significant sort of agitator and sort of platform by which data is starting to become valued a lot more. The problem is, as I mentioned, it's the largest resource, the most abundant resource on Earth, but it's the most underutilized. So there's the big problem for me, which is converting data into insights and intelligence and making better decisions. We're getting better and better at gathering data, securing it, undertaking analytics. What we're not doing well at is converting that intelligence into better decision making that creates value for our community and for our businesses. And I have my fingers crossed that in the next sort of year to 3 years, as we come out post-COVID, that we will just naturally be a little bit more aware of the value of data. But we need to have some really, I think, important supporting mechanisms. And whilst people often criticize the work that was undertaken in Toronto by Google and Sidewalk Labs at the Quayside development, one thing that project did leave us with as a legacy is some excellent work around civic data trusts. And this is where we have formal platforms and mechanisms and governance arrangements in place that ensure that the value of data is distributed more equitably. So I think there's some great emerging tools like civic data trusts on the back of COVID and a greater realization on the value for data that positions us all globally over the next 5 to 10 years to finally realize the value that data can bring to our communities and businesses.
Yeah, no, I read about the that civic side of it, and it's fascinating how sometimes you stumble into a good outcome with the context not being quite the same. Najib, how do we become the poster child within Cyberview and responsibly, but still present and publish and expose the very powerful and beneficial data perhaps that you're collecting, the drone environment or the autonomous vehicle environment? How do we expose that to developers and third parties, private or indeed government alike, responsibly? How do you go about doing something like that?
Okay, just to share, over at our office in Cyberjaya, we have what we call these common integrated platforms. From this common integrated platform, we harvest data from multiple sources, inclusive of from building, energy, traffic, autonomous vehicle, usage of telecommunication via our LoRa networks and whatnot. So we have all these database here that we capture for Cyberjaya community. So from this data, exactly, for instance, also we have this one data to capture about the propensity to spend for people when they come in and want to buy buildings, and they look at the rental rate in Cyberjaya. So all this data we have captured here for Cyberjaya. Now, in terms of sharing, at the moment we have not shared this data with other external parties. We are just use it to make things better for us. For instance, like we control the traffic in Cyberjaya. So we look at the how many people that pass through the junction and think like how long it takes for them to pass through the junction. So we use data just for our own consumption to make things better and more effective in Cyberjaya. But as far as sharing those data with other external party, we have yet to go to that phases yet, because we look at the data that we have. Also, this about consumer trend in Cyberjaya, and then the amount of money that we should spend on things. So all these things is captured under this fintech platform and whatnot. So as far as we have not churned out the data and work with people, we have not used the big data analytic to review the data and things like that. But at the moment, we just use it for our consumption to make things more better and efficient in Cyberjaya, so to speak.
No, and I think that reflects the stage of the progress, right? As you evolve and get more confident and comfortable and be more responsible about how we potentially do that, we might see, the sort of hackathons of the future.
Definitely.
Data sets anonymized, obfuscated, nice complicated word for effectively anonymization. But David, from a technology provider perspective, how do you ensure that it's captured and stored and looked after? I mean, that falls firmly on your plate, doesn't it, from a responsibility perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a security perspective, right? And that's why I think we want to try to empower organizations, right, out there that's using data. But if you look at data, I guess the way it's kind of getting consumed is a lot of the data and telemetry is getting pushed up to a massive cloud data lake platform, right? Because developing anything on-prem in your own environment, it's just going to be a bunch of a big headache around that. But so the moment you kind of push it out to cloud providers, that has the ability to ingest this a massive amount of telemetry coming in. And that's where the concept of shared responsibility comes in, which all the cloud players kind of tout, and even we do as well. To look at it that infrastructure-wise, yes, we will take care of the data, but the responsibility of making sure that data is secure and who has got access to it is ultimately, again, the responsibility of the end users, right? And to the point around where a lot of this data and telemetry is being stored, and I can go back to history, and we've actually seen real world attacks that happen on these data sets, right? And I give you a classic case of even Uber, not Uber, it was Tesla, right? Their vehicles, the telemetry was all being pushed up onto a public cloud platform. A simple misconfiguration of that cloud platform provider exposed the entire data set out. So you can imagine the nightmare that kind of ensued towards that. So from a technology point of view, from our perspective, yes, we definitely have the technologies to give you that visibility, which I've talked about. Where does your data really reside? Who has got access to it, and how that's being used? And it kind of cuts across, the popular cloud providers that are kind of going out there and saying that, hey, look, we can ingest all the telemetry for you. We can analyze the data, put machine learning analytics on it. But what use is that when the data itself is compromised, right? By simple misconfiguration of it. There's one aspect of it that from a security perspective, kind of want to talk about. But on the other hand, how we are kind of approaching it from our perspective as well is that, so within Palo Alto Networks, we've got this massive data lakes, right? And the way we kind of look at it is that we are not keeping the data all to ourselves. Security, cybersecurity has gone down this route of the more telemetry we have, it's considered intellectual property, but that's actually changing. We're trying to expose our data sets out to our partners as much as possible. And when it comes to IoT, right, we're getting massive amount of telemetry from IoT from a security perspective that's coming up into our data lakes. So now the question is, how do we expose? And we have APIs exposed to partners to actually come onto the platform, develop unique applications that can actually use the data sets that our devices are actually picking up from an IoT perspective. Our firewalls, the endpoint itself, that's all going into this massive data lake. So a lot of that work has been taken. We secure it. We secure it for the users. They generating themselves. But how are we also thinking in terms of democratizing that data out for research purpose, right? Yeah.
Which potentially raises that specter of monetization. Adam, let me just throw the last question to you. Given the increased access to that data, how do governments and third parties responsibly monetize? What's your experience on that?
Michael, yeah, I don't think we are at a level of maturity of monetizing data yet. That's my response. We're opening data, we're sharing data. We're still yet to exchange data in an open marketplace that will put a value on a data set and a data asset. We're seeing little bits of it. Some sectors do it really well. The stock exchange, data fuels that entire sector for our cities and communities. I don't think we're at that level of maturity of effectively at scale monetizing data.
Thank you for that, Adam. I'd hoped that you would have ended there with a bit of a gauntlet throwdown to everyone involved in smart cities, because look, it's important for me to thank you all as the panel. Adam, David, Najib, Dr. Rasida, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. We covered a lot of ground. We covered the security topic. We covered the monetization of data right at the end. But perhaps the thing that spoke most to me as we were going through to this is, sure, we need to get the infrastructure right. And Dr. Rashida, you talked a lot about the investment, Jindala and otherwise. But what that will enable is the thing perhaps that we need to focus on next. That new gold, that new oil, that most abundant resource, Adam, that you refer to as well, data. On that note, I'd like to thank you all very much. I hope you have a fabulous set of days, and goodbye to all of you watching from home.
Hi, everyone. We hope that you have enjoyed the Smart City Track Industry panel discussion as much as we did. I think it was very spirited. I think there was a lot of variations in the topic that we talked about, but also a lot of depth. So thank you, Mike, Najib, Dr. Rosida, David, and Adam for such a great and insightful discussion. It's most definitely a great honor. So we thank you, everyone, for staying with us until the end of our opening session. As I've mentioned earlier, we're giving away 3 exciting prizes at each of the 8 sessions. All you need to do is complete a short survey by scanning the QR code that is shown on your screen, or go to bit.ly/DXDsurvey1. Ladies and gentlemen, we are just getting started. Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry, excuse me for a while. So we are just getting started. We have 7 more awesome sessions in these 4 days. Coming up after the lunch break in the afternoon is the Green Thematic track that is powered by Frost & Sullivan. Also joining the session are some of the industry-leading green tech innovation drivers and practitioners. They are the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Centre, MDEX, Business Digital Adoption, and Volvo Car Malaysia. I hope you are as excited as I am to see how that goes. To learn more about our conference programs and speaker profile, please scan the QR code on the top right of your screen or go to bit.ly/DXD agenda. Please also share the Digital X Data 2020 program with your colleagues and friends. If you need any assistance from us in any of the programs in the conference, please email us at events@thestar.com.my. I'm signing out for now, but this page will remain live for the next 10 to 15 minutes. And remember to complete the short survey and stand a chance to win one of the 3 exciting prizes. Thank you and see you again later this afternoon at 2 o'clock. Bye.
The drop-off point, or could avoid filling out lengthy consignment notes. With DHL on the go, you can now send parcels or documents easily. Tell us your shipping details and let our chatbot guide you the rest of the way. Make payment through a secure payment gateway. Arrange a pickup at your preferred location. All of this is done via WhatsApp from your home, office, or anywhere, at any time. Scan the QR code or WhatsApp us now. Ready, chat, go! With DHL on the go.
Right now, digital connection is human connection. And it's those digital connections Palo Alto Networks has spent 15 years securing. In the last few weeks, we've secured companies, governments, and schools as homes became offices and computers became classrooms. As the world's largest cybersecurity company, we're already protecting millions of remote workers and millions of human connections. Palo Alto Networks, next-gen cybersecurity delivered today.